There are so many vibe coding videos on YouTube that barely scratch the surface, most of which usually involve building a to-do list app. So a few weeks ago, I challenged myself to see could I build a complex full-stack web app using these new vibe coding tools. And over 3 days, I built InsightsLM, a fully functional clone of Google's NotebookLM. And I recorded the entire build. This is quite a complex app that involves file uploads and processing, chat to your documents with AI using a technique called RAG, inline citations, podcast generation, and more. And I accomplished this without writing any code using the tech stack of Lovable to create a front end, Supabase, and n8n. So in this video, you're going to see the highlights, which is over 2 hours of actual building, problem solving, and wiring up workflows. And here you'll see the real process, how the front end, the back end, authentication, and all the automations can fit together, as well as showing the various bumps along the road. I've since published 2 GitHub repos for this project, so we already have real users using this software. So by the end of this video, you'll see a fully working, complex web app with deployable GitHub repos that you can use right now, one for public LLMs, and another that can run fully privately and locally. If you have an idea for your own web app and you want to see how you can use this tech stack to achieve it, then this is the video for you. And to help, I've created detailed timestamps so that you can jump to particular sections that may be of interest to you. Finally, I put a lot of work into this build, so I'd really appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Before we dive into the build, here's a quick demo of the app and a quick recap of the high-level architecture. So here we are on the login screen. So I can just put in my credentials and click sign in, and that brings me straight into the dashboard of InsightsLM. So we'll just click on create notebook. This brings you into the notebook layout, and then we just need to upload sources to start a conversation. We'll click on upload a source. And here are the 2 documents that I downloaded, so we can just drag these in. And then you'll see that these are being processed by the n8n workflows. So it's actually indexing the contents of these PDFs in a vector store. It has just generated a notebook title and description. So for example, if I ask what are the claim procedures for lost baggage, so this chat message is going to n8n, and then the AI agent is actually querying the vector store, which has these documents, and it's able to create a grounded response, as you can see there. And you have these citation links. It opens up and jumps to the specific chunk or the specific section in that document that was used to ground the generation of this paragraph. So this is factually accurate, and it's very easily verifiable because you can simply just click on the citation link. We also have the deep dive conversation, the podcast that you can create on NotebookLM. So if you click on generate, all of the sources are being sent in to create an engaging script that 2 hosts can then discuss in a podcast format.
When you look at a travel insurance document, it can be pretty overwhelming at first glance, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. These things are dense documents packed with information, aren't they?
If I jump into one of my other accounts, here we have a number of notebooks set up, and the system creates all of these icons and these color-coded panels similar to NotebookLM. So really cool. So here we have an overview of the architecture of this app. So the user interacts with the front-end app, which is what we created on Lovable. And this is a JavaScript app using the React framework. When the user logs in, it hits the Supabase authentication system to make sure they are who they say they are. And then there are various policies set in Supabase to make sure that they can only see their own data. They can't see the data of other users. And these policies can get quite complex as you're vibe coding them on a platform like Lovable. So with the user authenticated, they land on, let's say, the dashboard, they create a new notebook, and they start uploading files or sources. So those sources and those notebooks are all saved in the Supabase database. The PDF file itself is uploaded to storage, and then the processing of those sources is all triggered via these Supabase edge functions, which communicates with n8n workflows to actually chunk the documents, to create notebook descriptions, all of which is then sent back to the edge function and back to the front end, or it might be saving things to the database, or it might upload to storage itself, depending on what action has been taken. So it would be possible to create this entire system without n8n. You could just create quite complex edge functions that can handle all of the processing. But n8n is a great system to build out workflows, so it was really fast to be able to actually build out some really complex features here. If you'd like to learn more about how to customize this system, or to build similar apps like this that tie in n8n workflows, then check out the link in the description to our community, the AI Automators. So to kick things off, we need a good starter prompt to get the project up and running. There are some best practices with this, and a pro tip that I'm going to use is I'm going to get it to start with a blank project. Here's my prompt. I need a NotebookLM clone with these core features so users can create notebooks, upload documents, ask questions grounded in those documents, generate audio overviews, and save notes. So they're the key features. In terms of the tech stack, I'm saying we need to use Supabase for authentication, and it's pretty important to get that up front because it might be difficult to reverse engineer that in afterwards. I'm also saying Supabase will be used for data and file storage. And then I'm telling it that I'll be building the backend services on n8n that the app can interact with. That's more for informational purposes. So that's really the background to the app. But then I'm providing it a first step. So start by creating a blank project and then implement a login and logout screen and an empty logged in dashboard. And also do not allow users to register from within the app. So as opposed to getting Lovable to dream up what a NotebookLM style application is and create a whole raft of functionality, I'm keeping it quite lean and focused, and we can build it up step by step, and that's usually a better approach. Okay, so that is now spinning up, and it's getting the idea. It's list of the core features, design inspiration from Google's NotebookLM. Again, we will provide the screenshots, but it knows what I'm talking about. And then yeah, first version features, simple authentication, an empty dashboard. And then at this point now, we need to connect Supabase so that we can use authentication as well as data and file persistence. So let's do that. We'll click on the Supabase button up top. We connect Supabase, and then we can connect a project. I already have a few Supabase projects, so we'll create a new one for this. And at this point, we need to give it a project name. I'll call this project My NotebookLM. For database password, just click generate one, at which point then you can create your project. Okay, so we now have My NotebookLM set up on Supabase. So if we come back in here, then we can select that as our project, close out this dialog, and then we have more conversation. And Lovable has now confirmed that the app is connected to Supabase. So let's get it to proceed with creating the login and logout screens and blank dashboard. And since we've connected Supabase, it knows to use Subabase's authentication. So it's now building out all of the code files as needed. Great, we now have our dashboard. Now it has included a link for an account sign up, which I didn't want. So I can either restore back to my previous version and make changes to the prompt to be more specific, or I can just get it to make changes based off the current state of the app, which is what I'll do. Okay, so we now no longer have a sign up. So we now need to set up an account that we can log in with. So to do that, just go to Supabase. And if you click on authentication, then you have an add user button on the right, create new user. Then you can just add in your user details. And that creates a user on the system. So we come back in here then and put in the password. We're now logged in. Now it did get a bit creative on the dashboard, which is not really what I was expecting, but that's okay. We can strip a lot of this back. So next up, what I'm going to do is I'll go to NotebookLM and I'm going to take a screenshot of their dashboard. So this is the list of notebooks. So I'm just going to use the clipping tool on Windows, and I'm just going to copy that and drop it in here. And the key is there's different states of this dashboard. So I have another Google account, and when I log into it, you can see this is what it looks like when there aren't any actual notebooks. So I might also take a screenshot of that. And now we bring both of those screenshots into Lovable and explain, please update the dashboard based on the attached screenshots. These reflect two states, one where an account does not have any notebooks and one where there are notebooks available. So that's currently updating the dashboard. It is worth noting that we're not going to get a pixel perfect representation of what's in the screenshot here in Lovable. That's not really how these AI coders work. But as you can see, it is pretty close, and we will be able to refine the styles kind of further on in this project. This dashboard would give you the illusion that there's lots of notebooks set up now, but that isn't the case. If we go into Supabase, you can see that we don't actually have any tables yet. So there's two approaches we can take now. We can either A, start building out the data structure and make all of this interactive, or B is that we can try to build out the front end as much as possible, and then when we're happy with the front end, tie in the database. Now, Lovable actually recommends that you take the latter approach, that you try and build out the front end as much as possible before bringing in the back end. And the reason for that is, if you try to restore to earlier versions of the code, Lovable has difficulties in reverting the database structure to that previous version. So to avoid database schema problems when actually building out this app, I'm going to try to get as much of the front end done as possible using dummy text or placeholder text. And then when we get it to the point where we need it, we can then start plumbing in the back end. Now let's get Lovable to create the actual notebook interface itself. So this is a quick look at an empty notebook. You can see it's untitled, and we have a section for sources, for the actual chat, and then the studio on the right-hand side that contains the audio overview and the notes. So again, I'll take a screenshot of this with my snipping tool, and we'll copy it out, and then let's bring it in here. And instead of just getting Lovable to make the changes straight away, I'm going to use the chat feature so that I can actually analyze the image and plan out the changes. That way I can approve what it's proposing to do. I'm asking, let's create the notebook page. Here's a screenshot of both an empty notebook and a populated notebook. Can you plan out what needs to be done? So here we have a populated notebook, which is my DeLonghi coffee machine user manual. So we'll paste that in there as well. And actually I forgot to press the chat button there. So let's do that again. And I'll click chat this time. And it is generally good practice to actually get Lovable to analyze what it needs to be done before it does it. That way you can kind of avoid rework if it goes in the wrong direction. And it's provided quite a sophisticated implementation now of this. It is proposing to build out the database schema for this. So I'm going to ask to actually just build out the front end and ignore the database schema for the moment. All right, we have our notebook created. Let's have a look at it. So this is the empty notebook. And yeah, format-wise, that is really, really similar to what we have here. So we have our sources section with add and discover. We have our central section. We're missing the chat header, but that's fine. Then we have studio, audio overview, and notes. So that looks great. And then let's have a look at the page that actually has a completed notebook. This is my DeLonghi coffee machine. And actually, let's just hide the sidebar for a second so you can really see this. So we have our sources, we have our chat interface, and then the studio on the right-hand side again. Overall, this is looking really good. I'm going to get it to strip out some features though before we progress any further. So things like discover, the share button, creating audio overviews in more languages. These are features that we're not going to implement in this version. So let's tidy up the front end before we move on to the next screen. And a really good way of doing this is by using this edit feature here. You click on edit, then you can choose elements on the page that you want to change or get rid of. So I'll choose the discover button, for example. And then I can just click delete element, and then that removes it there. Another one is this div. I can just click that and delete. So this is a really good approach to tidy up the front end because you don't need to describe to the AI what changes you want to make. You can simply just click on the elements that you don't want and delete them. We don't really need share or settings or this button up here. So let's get rid of those. And then when you're finished, just click save, and it'll actually commit those changes to the code repository. So we're nearly there on the front end. There's one more screen I want to do, which is the add sources screen. So if we come into NotebookLM and click add, you'll see this pop up. So I want to create this next. And then I think we'll be finished with the front end and we can start tying in the database tables. So this front end first approach is what Lovable recommend for beginners, where you start with mock data, build the layouts and the flows and logic without connecting a database. So now let's take a screenshot of this pop-up and let's copy it in and back into Lovable. When a user clicks add under the sources column, I want a pop-up based on the following design. And then I just paste in that screenshot and click enter. And I have chat enabled for this. So again, it's just planning out what it needs to do. And all of that looks good. So I'm just going to click on implement the plan and off it goes. So that is finished. Let's give it a go. Click on add. We have our pop-up. Now it does look different to that, as you can see there. So what I might do is actually revert the previous version. I'll attach the screenshot to the actual message to implement the plan. I think it might have just based it off this plan as opposed to the plan plus the screenshot. So to do that, you can just go back up to the last code changes, which were these visual edits. Click on restore, and it'll revert the code base to that state. And now I'm going to say, can you implement that plan again based on the following design? And it's now pasted in. And that's a lot better. Yeah, that looks much more like the design in terms of the layout. And we even have our source limit at the bottom as well. So that looks great. Let's carry out a couple of edits on this before moving on to the database and backend. So this discover sources we don't need. So we'll delete that. And for the moment, let's get rid of these options and we'll just support dragging and dropping of files for this phase of the project. This can be added in later if needed. So that's deleted. Okay, we now have the bulk of the front end completed. So let's now start tying in the back end. So we'll use our chat mode again so we can actually plan this out. I'm asking it to plan out the database structure for the back end. So here's our full analysis. We need a notebooks table where we can save the notebooks. That makes sense. Needs a sources table. which has a processing status, which is very good. We then have chat messages, which is needed, with conversation threading and ordering, that's very good. Then we have user-created notes with the notebooks. There's a section for studio content, generated audio overviews, mind maps, and other AI-generated content. We might delete that. Then we have user profiles. Generally, it is a good idea on Supabase to have a profiles table. Let's not complicate it though with access permissions. We'll get rid of that requirement. Okay, so let's propose changes. So remove subscription tier from profiles. Remove the user preferences table completely. Notebook collaborators for future sharing feature. Let's get rid of that. So then for the chat messages, we save in each individual message. So a little bit of thought needs to go into this because it'll be n8n that'll be providing this back and forth. But let's create it for the moment and we'll play it by ear. Suggested questions then, this appears at the bottom around the search bar. Yeah, well, let's remove that for the moment and we can figure that out when we get to it. And let's remove all of the studio content stuff. RLS makes sense because you don't want some users seeing other users' data, that's okay. Okay, replan based on this. And I'm leaving chat turned on because I want to see what it's actually proposing. Okay, that looks good. One thing we don't want though is public access to the files in the buckets. So I'll just tell it that the sources storage buckets should be private. Let's implement the simplified database schema and the private storage bucket. Okay, let's see how it goes. All right, so our database tables have been created and now it's connecting the tables to the app itself. Now if we come into Supabase and go to table editor, you can see we have a number of tables there and you can see how they're all connected. So we have notebooks that have sources, that then have chat messages associated with them. And now it's knitting in all of these front-end elements to the back-end tables. Okay, so let's try it out. So now if we click Create Notebook, and if we choose Add Source, let's just drag in a file, and that's okay. So we've got a couple of errors. So we'll make some changes here. The way NotebookLM works is that if you click Create New, that brings you into the Notebook Edit page, and then it auto-loads the Add Sources pop-up, and then the actual title is editable. And if you come back here, then you can see that that untitled notebook is created. So by clicking that Create New button, it actually creates the notebook. So we need Lovable to do that as well. So I've just selected this Create Notebook button, and I'm saying when the user clicks this, it should create the notebook in the database. Great, we're now up and running with our Create Notebook. So if you click it, it brings you into this untitled notebook. And then you can confirm that by going to the database, clicking refresh on the bottom right, and then you can see your notebook line in the database. That took a bit of time to fix because there was a number of issues I had to work through with the AI, but we eventually got there. So right now, once you click Create New, it loads up a new notebook. And we do have another issue there, which is it is now creating the notebooks. If I refresh, I have 4 notebooks, but it should redirect you to the notebook page when you do that. If I delete these out, and if I click Create Notebook, it is redirecting me here. And when I go back to this page and click Create New, it isn't redirecting me. That's probably a different button, actually. That's probably the reason. So the functionality of this Create Notebook button should be the same as this one. Okay, so it says that's finished. So now if I click Create New, excellent, it is redirecting me. So that's a perfect example of AI coding. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. You're just finding issues, then conversing with the AI to actually fix the issues, and hopefully not breaking other functionality in the process. Great, so our notebook creation is now working. However, they're all untitled. So let's now allow the naming of these notebooks. And this is done in 2 different ways, actually. So you have edit title on the dashboard itself. And if you click into the notebook, you can actually select it. So for the moment, maybe we'll just have the edit title here. So let's select that. So the AI knows what we're talking about. The notebook title should be editable by the user. And on change of the title, it should save to the database. Cool, so that should be now editable. Let's test it out. Well, it might be editable, but it's actually a button is the problem. I can't edit the title as this button redirects to the dashboard. Only clicking the icon should redirect to the dashboard. Okay, let's try it again. Cool, it is now editable. So this is Notebook 1. That has updated, and now if we go back to the dashboard, yes, Notebook 1, excellent. Let's implement a delete notebook so that I don't have to go into the database to do it. So let's choose this button. Actually, let's just replace this with the delete icon. And then clicking it should show this pop-up. And let's see what the pop-up is like here. Yeah, that's it there. So I'll just send in a screenshot. This is where Lovable is really cool, that you can just drop in screenshots like that. Okay, we now have a delete button. Then if we press it, yeah, we get our pop-up. You're about to delete the notebook. Are you sure? Click delete. Now it's redirected me to a notebook. It did delete it though, so somewhat correct. Okay, let's try it. Let's delete this one. We got our pop-up, click delete, and yeah, we stay on the dashboard. Another bug fixed. Cool, so let's click into this notebook now and let's start adding sources. So this is where things get a bit fun. So if we click on add, we have this. Now it has added these buttons as well, which we can delete. But let's just try and upload a file. So grab a file, and it has created the source. So I can see the actual PDF I just uploaded there. Did it create it in the bucket? Let's see. Storage, sources, no. And then everything that you see here is just placeholder text that we need to dynamically generate based off the sources that are uploaded. Okay, so a bit of work to do with this one. The way NotebookLM works is that you select the sources, and then depending on what these checkboxes are, when you have a conversation with it, the conversation is restricted to those documents selected. That's very nice. That's pretty advanced functionality. I think for phase one, we might not do that. We might just base it off whatever is uploaded to the notebook. Let's build in some functionality here. So at least we need the idea of removing a source, and the source should be saved to storage as well. So I've selected the sources container, and I'm asking, can you remove the selection of sources and add in a menu per source based on the attached design? These menu items should result in confirmation pop-ups before action is taken. Okay, and let's see how it's worked. Not very well. I can't actually see the menu. Oh, right-click. Oh, they've done it as a right-click. So then rename source and remove source. Cool. Yeah, that works really well. Yeah, within NotebookLM, you actually have to hover to see the three dots. And they have an indicator as to the type of file, which is PDF. So we could add that later. But right-click is a really nice idea. So yeah, if we click remove source then and click delete, it has deleted it. And now let's go into Supabase, table editor, sources, and that's gone. Cool. Let's test the rename function. So I've set that to 123. That's worked. And if I refresh here, yeah, title 123. Brilliant. So currently the source is being saved to the database, but it isn't actually been uploaded to Supabase storage. So you see file path is actually null there. So that's next on the list. So let's come in here, click on add. I'm just going to select this kind of div so it knows what I'm talking about. So I'm saying here that the file should be uploaded to the sources bucket, and it should be in a folder that has the notebook ID. That way we don't end up with, millions of files in a single folder. So it's outputted an answer which is proposing to create buckets and policies, which I know already exist. So what I've done is I've used the chat mode, and I've asked it to review the current Supabase policies, tables, and buckets, and then propose an approach. And it's actually gone and done that, and now we have a much better approach to solve this. So we'll just click on implement the plan. And off we go. Okay, looks like it's done. Let's give it a go. So we'll click add. Let's upload the file. We have success and reload the bucket. Yes, we have the folder, which is the notebook ID. Then this is the file. Looks like it's been given a unique identifier, which I'm okay with. And if we click download, excellent. So we have persistence of files into the database. And you can see we have a new source. Now the problem is we don't actually have a path to it, which looks like a problem. So there needs to be a link between the source and the file in the storage bucket. I'll use chat mode again, just so that I can actually analyze it. And it's found the problem, which is that it left itself a to-do, but it never actually did it. So now it's proposing to do it. So let's click that and see how it goes. Okay, let's give it another go. All right, great. We now have our file path, and there's the two files. Cool. And let's now also make sure that when you click remove source on one of these files, it deletes it from the bucket. I'm getting this internal error a little bit at the moment. Not exactly sure why. I'll just refresh the screen. I think it's struggling to actually preview this. I'll come back to this one after lunch. It's possibly a Lovable issue. Yeah, it looks like that was a temporary issue, so we're back up and running. So let's test it out. I'll just remove all sources here. And now if I come in here and refresh the bucket, we still have one, but I think that might be a stray. Let's just delete that and let's try it again. So there's no sources. Let's upload one. It appears there. And that file is there now. And now if we delete, cool, yeah, it's deleted. And it's removed from sources. Brilliant. Okay, so we have our notebooks where you can upload sources. And then that total reflects there. That's nice. Now if we come into NotebookLM and let's create a new notebook and let's upload the same file. So it comes in here, it's processing it. Yeah, it auto-populates the title based off the sources uploaded, and then it provides a summary as well. Interesting. If you add another source, the actual title and the description don't change. Okay, so it's just a one-off creation of a title and a description. And even if you remove the original source that formed the title and description, it stays the same. Okay, that's doable. So this title and description then need to be at the notebook level within the database. We have title and description there. Okay. So let's set up our first n8n webhook where we're going to process a file to generate a notebook title and description for this section. So let's jump into n8n. We'll call this one generate notebook details, and we'll just start with the webhook. So it starts with a webhook and responds with using respond to webhook node. Okay, so let's save that, and then let's copy out our test URL. So we're going to need to save these URLs somewhere. Now let's drop in our logic here, and we'll use the chat so that we can actually create a plan. And for this webhook, let's also set some authentication. So I'm going to use header auth. We'll create a new credential, and we'll call this our my NotebookLM auth. That's the name, and then we'll just go to LastPass and just generate a secure password. Obviously, this can be changed after the video. Make it pretty long, and we'll copy that. And let's bring it in here and click Save. So I'm back into Lovable. So what I'm saying is I need the following logic. When a notebook is created, the title is set as untitled notebook with the description set as empty. When the first source is uploaded, I want to ping this web service so that I can respond with a title and description that can then be saved to the notebook. I want the URL stored in an environmental variable as well as the header auth, which I've just set. And as the service may take time to respond and to avoid duplicate calls to this endpoint, perhaps we need a status field. So maybe before it pings it, it sets it as processing and then completed once it comes back. And then we can set the data and it'll save in the notebook. And then ideally we have a loading spinner where the title and description are as they are being generated. All right, let's see what it plans. Okay, so it's going to have a status field at the notebook level, which will be generation status, pending, generating, completed, or failed. Then we have environmental variables within Supabase secrets, so there'll be the notebook generation URL and then the header auth. Then it'll be creating an edge function, because we don't obviously want this on the client side. That'll handle this external API call with error handling and timeouts. This all looks great. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. Okay, let's do it. Cool. So it has finished it. Let's have a look at what it's done in Supabase. So if I refresh my notebook, I should have my status column now, which I do, generation status. Now it's set to completed, but that's fine for the moment. Let's go into edge functions. Yeah, generate notebook content. Very cool. So let's look at the code. And these are the environmental variables that we need to set. So let's actually do that now. So notebook generation URL is the first one. And that is, just use our test one for the moment. Let's just save that. Notebook generation auth. I think this is separated by a colon. So we could try that. So it should be authorized colon and then the password. We'll give it a go anyway. I think they're the only two environmental variables we need. Let's try it. So into n8n, let's listen for a test event. Back into Lovable. And then let's create a new notebook and let's upload a source. And we're still listening, but nothing's actually happened. Okay, so let's see what is going on. Into the database. It has been created. Generation status is pending. That's good. So if we go into the edge function, has it been triggered? Invocations. It has not been triggered. Okay, let's ask it to analyze and see why it wasn't triggered. Of course, yeah, so we're not actually extracting content yet, which we don't necessarily need to at this point, because we can do that in n8n. We can just pull that file. Let's have a look at the table, notebooks. Yeah, we just need to pass the file path. Yeah, so instead of basing this on the content of the PDF, simply pass the file path. We'll extract that on the n8n side. Okay, it says that's finished, so let's test it out. Click listen for test event again, create a new notebook, load the same file into n8n. Let's see, do we get our ping, which we haven't yet. So maybe let's come into the edge function and see, is the edge function triggered? Oh no, we got a generation failed. Ah, but look, the edge function has triggered. That's great. This webhook is not registered for post requests. I always make this mistake. Change this to post, and let's try it again. There we go, and boom! No respond to webhook node found in the workflow. That is perfectly fine. Okay, great. What payload did we get? And let's just put this in, maybe respond to webhook. All right, we've got the ping from the edge function now, and you can see source type is PDF. We have our file path on Supabase storage. Excellent. And it's fully secure as well because we have authentication set. So next up now, let's put in another node. We'll go to Supabase. We essentially need to download this file. So we'll go Supabase. It'll be a custom Supabase call because it's not one of the actions listed. Supabase. I might just go to ChatGPT for this one. What endpoint do you hit on Supabase to download a file from a storage bucket? I have the following file path. Of course, yeah, so we need a signed URL. These are private files. Yeah, and it looks like I can get the signed URL with this API call. So for this, let's just set up the Supabase authentication first. So just click Create New Credential, then come into the API settings of your project, and we'll copy in the URL. And then this one is my NotebookLM Supabase. And then service role secret is under API keys. We'll drop that in there and click Save. And yeah, we have green, so we are now connected. And now, actually, yeah, we don't need that. So then it's just a HTTP request. So we're going to get the signed URL for this file. Authentication is Supabase, my NotebookLM Supabase. And then according to ChatGPT, this is the URL we need to post to with an expires in body. And then we just need our URL of our project, which is there. And then the bucket name is sources. And then the file path is what we're getting from the web service, which is here. Cool, let's test this and see. Click test step. Yeah, we have got a signed URL. First time with ChatGPT, never happens. That's brilliant. Cool, it should literally be then as simple as just a HTTP request to this URL with this domain. Let's try it. HTTP request, then just a get, put in the domain, and then the signed URL. Now let's test it. And that didn't work. Why did you not work? Yeah, it's the wrong URL. That should be the one. Invalid JWT, that's probably fine. It might have expired already. Yes, it worked, binary. And we have the PDF download. And actually this download file, it would be ideal if we could get headers as well. Response JSON. And just run it again. No, it needs to be text. So yeah, we just need to set include response headers and statuses. That way then we'll be able to figure out what type of file this is. Under content type, you can see it's application.pdf. Okay, so let's put in a switch. And then if the content type equals application.pdf, which is this stream. And of course, you could have lots more. It could be MP3s, could be Word documents. So then we're going to have extract from file, extract from PDF, which is there. And actually, let's just pin this data. And let's just run this end to end. So you just click P to pin the data that we got from the web service. Let's test the workflow. Generates the signed URL, downloads the file, and then it works through the switch, realizes it's a PDF, extracts from file. And cool, yeah, there's all our text. So this is all of the text that's in that document. And from here, then let's just put that straight into an LLM to get it to generate a title and a description. Okay, so this is generate title and description. And then the user message is going to be all of the text in that file. And then the system prompt will be based on the data provided, output an appropriate title and summary of the document. Only output in JSON, always no harm saying that. And let's put in an output parser. So we'll just set it as a structured output parser. That's going to be title and summary. Okay, so the AI can add the title and the summary there. And then we just need to assign a model. Let's just use maybe OpenAI. Even GPT-4o Mini would work. Anything small, really. It should not take much kind of processing power to figure out what's in this file. 4.1 Mini, let's use. So now let's actually run this, because we have the data from here already. And there's the summary. Excellent. And now let's just respond with this. Output, title, and summary. Yeah, and we can just respond with all of that. That is that web service complete. So let's unpin the data. And actually, I'll spit this back into Lovable. So I'll just copy out this output and come back into Lovable. And I'll say the web service is going to respond in this format. And just paste it in. So there's probably a need to change the edge function, or at least how the edge function is processing the response. So let's try this again then. Let's create a new notebook, upload our file. And actually, I forgot to click test workflow. Generation failed. That makes sense. Do that again, create new notebook, upload the file, and look at that, generating everything. This really nice loading then comes and says failed to generate the content, but we're nearly there. Let's come into the edge function and see what happened. It did respond. Happy with that. Unexpected response format. So let's drop that back into Lovable. I thought it fixed it, but it obviously didn't. Okay, it claims it's fixed it. So let's go again. Click test workflow on n8n. Create new. Drop in the file. There we go. Yeah, it worked. We now have our title and our description. That's great. Delighted with that. And if you look into the edge function, there's no errors. And if you come into the database and look at the notebook, That's the title and description, and completed is the generation status. So that's excellent. Now that we can upload sources to our notebook, let's have a conversation with these documents through this chat interface. So there are two key elements to this. The first one is your standard LLM chat, where you send a message, you get a response, you send another message. The second one is the RAG aspect. So it's actually processing these documents, chunking them, saving them into a vector store so that they can be retrieved in real time. So let's just do the chat side of it first. And if we look at how this works within NotebookLM, you have your notebook with the source, you ask a question, such as this one, then a response is generated and outputted on the page, and then you can ask a follow-up question. So we're going to be using n8n for this back and forth. Every message that we send in via our chat interface is going to hit an n8n webhook, and it's going to process a response that we send back. So to do that, we go to n8n and we create a new workflow. This one's called chat, and we're going to need a webhook as a trigger, because that's how the app and the edge function is going to hit n8n to get a response. So same as before, we have our webhook. It's going to be post. Let's not forget it this time. We can use the same authentication that we're using with the other webhook, which is there. And again, we'll respond with the webhook node because we can be quite specific around what we're sending back then. Cool. So now what we need is an AI agent. We need to be able to go to an LLM, pass the query, and get back a response. And eventually, in terms of the tools, we'll be adding a vector store to this. So there's our AI agent. We'll give it a chat model. Let's just use OpenAI's GPT 4.1, which is this one here. And then, as I mentioned, the tools we'll be using, eventually we will be adding Supabase vector store to this. Let's not do that just yet. Let's get the actual conversation going in our app. So then from memory, let's get clever about this, because we've already built a chat messages table on Supabase, but there's going to be duplication here because Lovable has created that just to show it on the front end. But actually, this agent is going to need to save memory anyway. So why not save it in Supabase as well? And then Lovable can actually reference the same memory as this agent. So to do that then, let's click on plus, and we're going to use Postgres because Supabase is built on Postgres. And then here you're going to need to create a new credential. So this is how you connect to Supabase to actually save the chat history. So then if you come into Supabase and if you click on connect at the top, you're going to get a lot of information on how to connect your project to different frameworks. And under type, if you choose Postgres or if you choose PSQL, and then under transaction pooler, click on view parameters, and it'll provide you with all of the details that you need. So we'll just copy all of these in. That's the host and the port. We have the user. And the only thing that's missing then is password. So this is the database password. So to get that, you just need to go to your project settings, click on database, and you'll see the database password. And from here, then you can reset the password, and I'll just generate a new one. So we'll copy that and click reset. And from here, then back into n8n, paste in that password, click save, and you'll get a green banner to say it has been successful. At which point you are now connected via Postgres to the database. And you can see the table name here is n8n chat history, so we can leave that as is. We'll set the context window length to say 20, and then let's just save that. Now if we come back into Supabase and go to the database, you'll see that we don't yet have that n8n chat histories table. We only have the chat messages table that we created in Lovable. So to actually get this new table to appear, let's just add a chat trigger. And let's just ask it a question. So connect that up, we'll open the chat and just say hello. And you can see that's gone to OpenAI to generate the response, but it's also gone to the Postgres chat memory twice for both messages. And now if we come into Supabase and refresh, you can now see we have our chat histories table. And if we open it up, you can see the two messages. Cool, so what we now need to do is essentially drop this chat messages table, because we're not going to use it. Instead, we'll use the n8n chat histories table, and then this session ID can actually be the notebook ID. Because if you look at, let's say, NotebookLM, you have a notebook ID in the URL. If you click refresh, it just clears the history. The notebook ID stays the same. So you're essentially just losing that chat history. So there's no reason why we can't implement the same thing. So we now need to go to Lovable and explain what we want to do. We want to drop the chat messages table, use this n8n one, and then we have a single source of truth of chat history for the notebooks. that can be used both by the agent when formulating responses as well as displayed on the front end. Cool, so I've asked Lovable to make a plan around this, and it's responded with an analysis of what's currently in play and what changes need to be made. I've asked Lovable to make a plan around this using the chat mode, and it has created a detailed plan which looks quite good. So I've triggered implementing that plan, and it's now going to propose to make some changes to the database. So let's apply those, and now it's implementing the chat functionality. Cool. So that has completed, but we are getting a build error, so let's see what it can do. Let's just try to fix it. I think it might struggle a little bit with this chat history format, because you can see this message is actually JSON, and there's quite a lot of parameters with it, so that's probably what needs to happen. Yeah, and that's fixed it. So actually, let's now update the session ID to match the notebook ID to see does this change. So this is our notebook ID. And now, has that changed? Yes, it has indeed. Something has changed anyway. So we have invalid message format, but at least something is showing up. So I've now just asked it to fix that. It needs to essentially pull the content, as you can see there. Great, that worked. Now both of them are showing as user messages, whereas this one is the AI message. So let's just explain that one. So yeah, within the message, if the type is AI, it should show on the left without a background, similar to the design attached. So let's just take a screenshot of this and add that as context. Okay, that's worked. So user message on the right, AI message on the left. Okay, so let's get rid of this chat message received now. And then in Lovable, let's now ask it, when a user adds a message into this chat interface, I need Lovable to post that message to my webhook, which is my n8n one. So this should be stored in a Supabase secret, and we already have the notebook generation auth stored in secrets as well. Let's actually enable chat for this. Let's see what it plans to do. Okay, so it's going to create the secret, create the edge function. Yeah, now it's actually going a bit astray here. It wants to store the message in the database, which it doesn't need to do. It just needs to send it to the webhook because n8n is going to store it in the database. So I'm going to make some changes here. So once the message is sent, we just need to show a loading icon. And then once a new record appears in the chat histories table by n8n, we can hide the loading icon, and then the text will appear automatically anyway. So let's click enter to that, and it can update the plan. And this is where the chatting side is brilliant, because if I didn't select chat there, it would have gone off and it would have made loads of changes, which might have been difficult to roll back. So at least you can get an idea of what it's planning to do and set it straight. That all looks good. Yeah, let's implement it. Lovable is actually asking me to drop in the chat URL. This is stored as a secret, so that's fine. They call it an API key, but it's not an API key. It's just a secret. Okay, so it says it's done. Let's give it a go. I'll click listen for test event. I've asked hi. Wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get anything. It took a little bit of a back and forth last time. We're not getting anything. That's okay. Let's come in now to our edge functions and see what's going on. So we have our send chat message edge function. Look at the logs. Yeah, we have an error, so that's okay. 403, which is an authorization error. So let's see what it's using in the code. It doesn't actually seem to be pulling the username and password for the webhook at all. So I'll get Lovable to make that change. All right, let's try it again. So I've sent a message. Let's see, do we get anything? I've sent hi. Yes, we are getting the response, and there's our message. Hi. Brilliant. So actually what we can do is we can respond immediately to that, because the agent might take time to actually respond. So we respond immediately to the webhook, and that's resulted in this AI is thinking, that's fine. And then it'll progress through the workflow, and then it'll save the chat history here anyway. So we don't need this respond to webhook. So let's now test the workflow end to end. So we'll click that, and let's just ask it, how are you? Now we do have an error. Oh, actually, we need to update the session ID, don't we? Yeah. So the session ID is actually, we can just define it below. Oh, are we getting that through from the web service? Let's see, debug and editor. Yeah, we are, session ID, excellent. So there it is. Drop that in there, and let's try it again. There's the question. Ooh, still get an error. No prompt specified. Ah, of course, there's no chat input. That is coming from here. There's our message. Try it again. So there's the question. We do have an answer, and there's our answer. Yeah, thanks for asking. Brilliant. Okay, so I've done a little bit of cleanup on the UI, and it's now looking a lot more like NotebookLM. So if we ask a question, I'm asking it to write me a poem. So write me a song, and you'll see that it'll pop in with the answer at the end. So there you go, there's our song. So we need to kind of fix up the style in here. It's just one big wall of text, so we need to implement some sort of markup. The other thing is that the question takes time to come in. So we need to kind of figure out a fix for that, because the edge function isn't saving the question. We're waiting on the agent in n8n to actually save it to memory here. So that's why when you ask it a question, it just says AI is thinking. So it would be nice to actually provide the question that was asked very quickly. Actually, there's a solution. How about, instead of it saying AI is thinking, it actually just says the message and it shows it as the bubble. That's a really good solution. So yeah, let's get Lovable to do that. So currently when you send the message, it shows AI is thinking. Instead, can we set this as the message that was just sent, and then present this as the user message, i.e. in blue, right, aligned, etc. This can still disappear when the new messages come in from the database. Let's actually use the chat for this. I just want to make sure it doesn't get confused, because I am asking a slightly strange question here. So yeah, it needs to add state exactly for the pending user message. Okay, implement it, and that might solve our problem. Yeah, write another song, showed up immediately, brilliant. And you can see the loading is there, so that's perfect. And there we go. Okay, let's figure out the styling of this, because I assume we're getting back markup. Let's have a look. So there's the last execution. Ah yeah, there's new lines and everything. We're just not showing the new lines there. Has that been saved in the history? Maybe it's not. Yeah, it is. The new lines are in history too. Can we render new lines in Markdown, like bold, etc., within this chat history interface? So that should transform that now into something a little bit more pleasing to the eye. Okay, looks like it's done it, and there we go. Brilliant. That looks great. This app is really coming together. So one thing that NotebookLM does really well is that when you ask it a question, the question moves to the top of the container, and then the text kind of populates down. So let's see, can we achieve that? And I might use chat for this just to see, does it know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's not really figuring out what I mean. Yeah, I think that's a much better understanding of the question. So let's try to implement that plan now, see does it work. This is real full stack development. We're doing front end at the same time as doing back end and web services and database engineering. Yeah, I didn't really get it. Like that should obviously just pop straight up to the top, and then you'd have space underneath. I think I'll leave this one as is. It's a nice to have, I think. Okay, so we're looking good. Let's now build in the second part of this chat, which is the RAG side of it. So when these documents are uploaded to Supabase storage, we need to then chunk them and save them into a vector database. And then within this agent, we can add the vector database retrieval tool so that we're able to chat to those documents. So from looking at the sources table, we have this processing status. Now it's kind of automatically been set to completed at the moment. So maybe when a new source is added here, we need to set this processing status to pending, let's say, then trigger a function which changes to processing, sends it to an endpoint on n8n, which can then do something similar to what we were doing in the previous function, which downloads that file, and it can then upsert it to the vector store. So for this, actually, let's come into database first, and let's just enable the vector extension. So we have extensions there. If you just search for vector, you'll see it'll pop up. So let's just enable that. And now we have PG vector enabled for this similarity search. And let's come back into Lovable now. We'll chat with it to make a plan. When a document is uploaded, the source is created in the sources table. I'd like to ping a web service with the file path to process that file. And actually for this, let's create the documents table that'll store these vectors. Go to Quick Starts and you'll see LangChain. So click on LangChain and that'll load up this query. Actually, that already enables the vector extension. But it's going to create this documents table. It'll create this match documents function that n8n is going to use. So yeah, leave it as that and let's just run it. And that's a return to success. And now if we come into our database, you can now see that we have this new table called documents. And that has a vector embedding, it has metadata and content. Brilliant. So then back to our plan. When a document is uploaded and the source is created in the source table, we're going to ping the web service with the file path to process that file. That will return a success or a failure. This can then be reflected in the, and what is it, is the processing state of the source. Yeah, processing status of the source. Okay, and while it has to think about that, let's now create a new workflow which can handle the actual ingestion of these documents and the chunking of them and upserting to the vector store. So we'll create a workflow. This is upsert to vector store. We're going to have a webhook as usual. This definitely needs to respond at the end, so we'll use the respond to webhook node. This is a post because we're getting the file path or the file ID. We'll use our standard header auth. And actually, let's just copy in some of the nodes we had from the previous workflow. So the generate signed URL, the download file, the switch, the extract, we can get all of this. So let's paste all of that in there. And this plan looks good. So we're going to have a new edge function called process document, which accepts a source ID and a file path. That makes sense. Now the file path is actually in the source ID, so it's not really needed, but anyway. Yeah, that all looks very, very good. So let's implement the plan. Nice. So we have a lovely green tick to say it's ready. So it's created two edge functions, process document and a process document callback. Okay, which might make sense actually. It might take a long time to chunk some large documents. Okay, and let's create this secret now in Supabase. So our webhook URL for document processing, and that is this one. So we'll just use the test URL for the moment. Click on listen for test event. And let's trigger this and see what happens. Again, it probably won't work first time, but you never know. Oh, something worked first time. Excellent. It did work first time. Let's set that to immediately and try it again. It's getting good. Okay, so we're getting the source ID, the file URL, brilliant, the file path, and we're getting the callback URL, which we already know anyway. Cool. Okay, so let's hook it up. So the file path, object sign source. So the file path is there. So then we were able to download it, work through the switch, extract from the file. So we have all of the text now that you can see there. And now we just need to upsert this to Supabase. So Supabase vector store, we are going to add documents to our vector store. So my NotebookLM Supabase is the credential, and then we can choose our documents table. We're going to insert the documents, and then the document loader, we'll just use a default data loader. Let's go basic for the moment. We'll just use a recursive character text splitter, and we'll set it as 1000 chunk size with a 200 overlap. I've done lots of RAG content on this channel. If you need any explanation as to what that means, then definitely check out my RAG masterclass. So an embedding model, we're going to use OpenAI's text embedding 3 small model, which is that one. Okay, so let's press go, and let's see, can it upsert it? It looks like it succeeded. So into the database, table editor, documents. Brilliant, we have vectors. We're getting lots of metadata on the file, so let's actually just change that for a second. Delete everything there. Default data loader. Yeah, we might just have another, let's open up another node here, because this will change depending on the type of file that's being processed. So maybe just a set fields, and then just, yeah, the text can just be mapped to that variable. And now that's what's going to be loaded in. So we'll just run that and run that again and refresh. Cool, yes, we just have the text now of the document. Now, one thing we need to add is our notebook ID. We don't have that here, and we need it because when an agent is querying this knowledge base, it'll be querying every document across all notebooks. So we need to restrict it essentially to the notebook. We could do that based off metadata. Notebook ID could be metadata. Yeah, that's not bad. We could try it. So for the default data loader, you can set metadata, and we'll add a property. So let's call this notebook underscore ID. And then we can set the value as, are we getting it from the webhook at the very start? 24433. Yeah, we kind of are. It's in the file path. We could probably get it a bit cleaner than that, but it's definitely in the file path. So yeah, let's just extract it from the file path. I could get Lovable to change the edge function to send it, but that's as easy to do it here. So let's do it in between these two. Or just use a code node. Let's keep going with our vibe coding. Yeah, so I'm just asking ChatGPT to give me the JavaScript for this. That looks good. Okay, yeah, first element. There is our ID. So we'll just call this one notebook ID. And we'll fix that one up. And then here we can reference this notebook ID now that we've extracted. And we'll save that. And now let's delete out everything again and run it again, just to make sure that everything is importing correctly. And there you go. Yeah, we have our notebook ID. Cool. So when we send in queries now to this vector store, we can filter by notebook ID first, which is in the metadata. And that will then create a subset of the vectors to base the actual retrieval off. Okay, so now that we've chunked and upserted the document to the vector store, we now need to hit our callback URL to say job done. So if we come into our edge functions, you can see we have this process document callback. This provides sample curl that we can use. So we'll just copy that out, and then we'll come into here, and then it's just a HTTP request to this, and we'll just import the curl. Now, I don't think it's going to import the actual JSON correctly. So let's just change that to using JSON. And I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, I'm just going to copy in this code and I'm going to ask, can you provide a sample JSON body to be sent to this function? Okay, cool. So source ID I'm happy with because we can now inject that in here. That's our notebook ID essentially. Completed is fine. The content, do we really need to pass content? Okay, content is essentially optional, so let's not pass it. Okay, so then let's actually test this out. You can see this is processing. So when I click run here, this should change to completed if it doesn't throw an error. Oh, it hasn't thrown an error, and it also hasn't changed to completed. And actually, if I refresh, no, still processing. Maybe the edge function threw an error. No, it didn't. Oh, I might be passing the wrong ID. I'm passing the notebook ID. I need to pass the source ID. That's my mistake. Yeah, it's the source ID. Try that again. So showing as processing. If I click test step, still processing. Ah, there we go, ready. Cool, so that worked. Now it did require me to actually refresh the page. So let's test this now end to end with the scenario active. So come into the workflow, we'll set it as active. And now let's actually get the production URL, copy that out, back into Supabase then, because we need to create the new secret. So we'll delete the old one and create the new one. So now this is active, so we can watch the executions. And now if we come into Lovable, and let's try to upsert a document. We'll drop in that document there. Processing failed. Okay, interesting. Let's see where it failed. I think the secrets take a minute or two to update. I think that'll work now if I do it. I haven't changed anything. I think it just takes a while to replace a secret. Yeah, that's processing. If we look at the executions, that has just succeeded. And it's ready. Excellent. That is an amazing end-to-end chunking of that document. And if we look at our database, we'll go into the vector store. Yeah, we can even see the document there. Brilliant. And now if we come full circle with this, if we go back to our AI agent, and here now let's add Supabase, metadata, the Supabase vector store. We'll be retrieving documents as a tool for the AI agent. Now we need to choose the right credential, which is that one. Retrieve knowledge can be the name. Then we can choose the table, so that's our documents table. The top K, or the limit, we'll say is 10. And then for option, we then can put in the metadata filter. We'll add the filter name, so this is going to be our notebook ID that you can see there. And that notebook ID then is what we're going to get back from the webhook. So actually, let's come back in here and just copy in the execution data. And you can see the notebook ID is there. So that's what we can drag in here. And that will then create a subset of the vectors. And we're only actually querying information uploaded to this notebook and not all of the notebooks. And then the other thing is we need to make sure that we're using the same embedding model. Otherwise, things are not really going to work, which is that one. Excellent. The moment of truth. Let's test it out. And let's just use a simple system prompt for the moment. You are tasked with answering a question using provided chunks of information. Your goal is to provide an accurate answer. If you cannot answer the question using the provided chunks, say, sorry, I do not know. You must trigger the vector store knowledge base tool, and that's key. Okay, so that's active, and let's test it out. It's Formula 1 regulations that have been uploaded. So is there any reference to geometric planes in the documents? Just thinking about it. Yes, there are references to geometric planes in the documents. And we get a list of 3 things. And let's just make sure it hasn't made that up. Go to the previous execution, and there you go. Yeah, it's triggered the Supabase vector store. If we click on the Supabase vector store, geometric planes is the query that it's sent into the vector store, which was then embedded. And this is brilliant. Look at the chunks that we got in response. That was the one actually that I copied it out. Now we have duplicates in the database, so we're getting duplicates here, but that's fine. We can fix that again. But this is brilliant. So there we go. We are now end-to-end on uploading documents to my NotebookLM, chunking them and embedding them using Supabase as a vector store. And then we're able to actually have a conversation with it, get back relevant information. So this is fabulous. So let's try another one. Let's open up a new notebook. And here's a random PDF on the rules of tennis. So let's download that one. If we come in here, click add, we'll upload that file. Now we have failed. So what part of that failed? Let's see. Edge functions. Well, actually, it didn't fail. Sorry. It is ready. So it was a false positive, I think. Oh no, this failed. This was the generation of the actual title and description. So that is generate notebook content. And yeah, I'm still using the test webhook for that. So let's update that quickly. And let's get our tennis regulations up and running. So generate notebook details. Yeah, it's not even turned on. So let's turn it on. Let's get our production URL, copy that out, back into Supabase secrets. And that one is the notebook generation URL. Paste that in there. Now let's delete the old one. Now let's save the new one. That might take a minute or two to actually work. Yeah, that worked. No error message. The new title and description have just come in. So this is the ITF rules of tennis. You can see processing on the left because the document is currently being chunked and upserted to the vector store. And that has just changed to ready. So it has successfully chunked the document. And now let's ask a question. What are the rules of tennis? Sorry, I don't know. Swing and a miss. Go to the agent, see what happened. Here's our agent. So it did go to the vector store. Didn't get any response. So the session ID or the notebook ID is that, CBOFE. Come into the database, documents. Yeah, the notebook ID is wrong. It should be CBOFE, as you can see there. It's set as 24433. And where do I set that? That is on the upserting side. It's there. Oh, that's probably this code node. Oh my God, I haven't even put in a dynamic file path. Of course it's not working. Okay, back to the webhook. Yeah, so just delete that. And there's the actual file path. And let's give that one more go. Well, actually, no, we need to upload the document again. Let's just clear down our documents. And we'll just remove the source. And let's try it one more time. And now refresh our documents table. And yeah, it has come in properly. And let's have a look. Yes, our notebook ID is correct. That is now ready. And the moment of truth. What are the rules of tennis? Definitely need a little loading icon there, so we can do that after. There you go. The main rules of tennis according to the International Tennis Federation. And we get 10 rules. And if we jump into our agent, wherever he is, and jump into the vector store, there you go. There's the chunks. Excellent. That's fantastic. So I think it's tweaking from here, you know, tweaking with different file formats, tweaking around the RAG retrieval, maybe improving the RAG retrieval, as well as obviously building out other functionality around the audio overviews and the notes. But we're making huge progress here. This is fabulous. So we now have the system returning data from our n8n chat. And in that example, it provided 10 rules of tennis, which corresponded to 10 chunks that it actually returned. What's really interesting is that if we look at the actual PDF, there are 31 rules in this document. And if I do the same test on NotebookLM, so I've created a notebook and I've uploaded this PDF, I've asked what are the rules of tennis, it provides back a lot more detail. It provides back 31 rules. Now, it doesn't provide them all. It does actually skip a few of them. So rule 11 to 15 is missing. But with all of these citations, what's interesting is that for this single query, it's returned 90 chunks. So if we look at our vector store here, we are only returning 10 chunks here, whereas actually with NotebookLM, we're getting 90 chunks for this query. It seems like this is dynamic. This changes depending on the number of sources, the complexity of the query. So there's a lot of sophistication around the actual chunk retrieval in NotebookLM. So we'll get into this in a bit more detail, but what I would like to do is actually provide these citations, because that way you can really trust the answers that you're getting and that they're grounded in the document that you've uploaded. So for example, if I click on number 86 here, brings me to that specific section of the document, which is really cool. So let's now implement this functionality as part of our NotebookLM clone. So this is quite a sophisticated piece of functionality. So let's have a look at it. By clicking on a citation, it's going to bring you to the specific lines in the actual document. So on the face of it, what we'll need to do, number one is we're going to need to actually store the content of the document in Supabase. Currently we have it in storage as a PDF file, and it's also chunked in the documents table. But I think we need a field that just contains all of the text and that we can spit it out there. So that will be in the sources, let's say. And we have a content field, so we can use that. And then to get the actual line numbers, I believe that's already stored in the chunk. So if we go to documents, in the metadata, you can see it there. Line numbers, so this is from line 12 to line 48. So we should be able to highlight those lines in the actual content. So that's ideal there. So what we do need is the actual document ID. So you can see at the bottom, it has the name of the document. You could have a number of different sources and we need to open up the correct source and jump to those line numbers. And if we look at the metadata for the chunk, that's not actually there. We do have our custom notebook ID metadata item. So I think we need to add our source ID and maybe a kind of a source name that we can show on screen. Okay, so let's make some changes then to the actual chunking process. So let's go to n8n. So this is our current upsert to vector store. And if we come in here to our default data loader, we need to set another metadata item. So this is going to be our source ID. And let me open up a previous execution so we can just get some data. So we'll copy this one to the editor. And that source ID is coming from the webhook. So we have that here in the body, which we can drop in there. And we don't have the actual source name coming through that webhook. Let's leave that for the moment. I think if we could jump to that section of the document in the preview on the left, that would be good enough. And then actually, while we're upserting to the vector store, let's implement this functionality. So if we look at the source, and if you click into it, you get this source guide. Now we're kind of doing this anyway at the start of a notebook, where when you upload the first source, it generates the summary and the title. So let's actually implement that now for every source. So you can see the summary, and that even lists key topics as well, which is quite nice. So maybe let's just do the summary as part of this phase. And let's do it here after this code node. So let's bring this out over here, make some space. And actually, let's grab the LLM node we have from this generate notebook details, because it's the same thing. We're just going to generate a title and description. So I'll copy that and bring it in here, and we can hook it up. So here then, we're going to be creating the document summary. And then we need to provide in the text from the file, which is there. Okay, we're using 4.1 mini. We have our structured output. And then we need to now save that to the document in Supabase. So let's click on plus. There's Supabase. We need to update a row, which is there. And the table is sources. And the match type then is just where the ID equals what we're getting through the webhook, which is here. And then we're going to be setting the field, which is actually, let's set content, because that is what we are getting from the extract from file, which is there. And then also we can now set our summary. We don't actually have a summary field. Yeah, we only have content. Okay, let's set a summary field. I could get Lovable to do this, but instead I'll just do it manually. So I'll just click plus. This is document summary. We can choose text, and that's it. Yep, nothing else to do. Okay, so there's our document summary. Back in here. And let's load this back up again. And now that shows up. And actually, let's just run this so that we can actually get the output that we can map to this field, which is now showing there on the right-hand side. Cool, and let's map that summary. Now it is outputting the title as well. That's what we did in the previous workflow. Yeah, I think that might be useful because the title that we have here is the file name, as you can see there, which is like it can have lower cases and dashes and is not necessarily reflective of the document. So we'll create another field for this, which is maybe display name, and we'll just set text as well. Okay, and let's set this display name then to be this title that was generated from the LLM. Okay, brilliant. And from here then we can just continue on as normal. So at this point now we have this summary and we have a nice display name. Now they don't actually do that, they use the file name. It's there if we need it in the future. And now we also have the source ID for these kind of chunks. So let's save this now and run it just to make sure everything works. Yep, that looks good. And now we come into our documents and have a look at the latest chunk. And yeah, cool, we now have source ID. That's ideal. And if we go into the sources, our latest document, yeah, we have the content set. We have our summary and we have our display name. Okay, so let's come back into the chat now because we now need the AI agent to spit out the citation of the chunk, essentially. Because if we ask a question like what is Formula 1 in this case, it is providing an answer, but it's not reflecting where it got that information from. So if we come into our chat then, and let's just have a look at the system prompt, and let's go with this one. So you're still tasked with answering a question using the provided chunks. Your goal is to provide an accurate answer while citing your sources using a specific markdown format. Now we might change this with the back and forth with Lovable. It might want it in a different format, but let's see. And what I want to do is take the note of the index of the chunk that's returned from the vector store, as well as the source ID of the chunk. And then I've given an example of what that citation format should look like. So kind of chunk index and then source ID. Let's see how this works. So we'll save. And now let's ask the question again. And actually, let's just clear the memory. I need to build a clear memory button, but for the moment I'll just remove everything from the database. Okay, chat has been removed and it automatically updates here, which is really cool. What is Formula 1? And I've just swapped out GPT 4.1 for Claude 3.7 Sonnet because I feel like it actually is producing better results. Okay, so you can see our citations here. So we have the chunk index is 0 in this case, but that's fine. We can get it to add a 1 to all of the indexes. So this is really nice now. We are getting chunk indexes and we are getting citations in line, very similar to what we're getting with NotebookLM. So now we need the ability to actually have this as a clickable kind of button that will then show the preview on the left-hand side, as well as jump into that particular section of the preview based off the lines. So maybe we also need to pass in the lines here as well, so that Lovable then can load up this document ID or the source ID, and it can jump straight to the lines. So now I'm just asking ChatGPT to kind of propose the best way to pass this data into the React app so that it can be like a button essentially with data IDs or something like that. The way ChatGPT is proposing that this is done is instead of sending a single output with all of the information and then having the citations in line, is instead to actually provide a structured response to the front end. So you'd have your text and then there will be a citation. So then on the front end, it's a lot easier for the React app to then have the buttons and then you can jump to the lines and the sources. So I think that's a good idea. Otherwise, you're going to get into kind of complex parsing and regex and stuff on the front end. So to achieve this type of output from the agent, let's try to use a structured output parser. So at the agent level, you can require a specific output format. So if we enable that, and let's connect an output parser, and we'll provide an example. So let's go with this one for the moment, structured output parser. And now from here, let's drop in our output. Now I do believe this needs to start as an object. So let's have it as output, and then we can paste this in. And then let's make a couple of changes to the example. So instead of label, that's index. We then have source ID, which is the example. And then we need lines from, which could be 25 as an example, and then lines to. And let's just explicitly say, this is the chunk index, chunk source ID, chunk lines from, chunk lines to. And the fact that citations is an array is good, actually. So you could have a number of citations for a specific paragraph. Then you have your text, and then it just does the same thing again. Okay. So we're asking a lot of this agent. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't get it right or if there were quite short responses because it's quite a complex output that it needs to do. But fingers crossed. I think with a reasoning model as well, we would have better chance of success here. So there's our output, save, and now let's run it and see. Oh, I forgot to update our system prompt actually, so let's do that first. Okay, I've made a few changes here. So I'm saying you must cite sources using the specified JSON output format. And I'm also saying take note of the index of the chunk, the source ID, the lines from and lines to, so we can trace back the cited source. Okay, let's roll the dice and see how it goes. And let's see the output. Yeah, that looks brilliant. And we have 2 citations for that paragraph, for example. Brilliant. Okay, now let's copy out that output. And let's bring this into Lovable. And we'll get it to make changes on the rendering now of the chat interface. And let's use the chat mode, so it needs to have a think about what we're going to do here. So I'm asking to make changes to the chat display. I've updated the web service output, and I'm saying I want to show citations as a button with the index, so number 1 or number 2. And when you click it, it opens the source document in the sources section on the left, displays the content field of the source, and we're now populating that with the actual document text. And then it jumps to the specific lines for that citation and visually highlights them. And then I've provided the sample data structure. There's a lot in that. I would be shocked if it gets this first time. Okay, let's see what an implementation plan looks like here. So yeah, lots of components needed for this and a bit of state management. Now it is saying it's going to maintain backwards compatibility with existing simple text messages. We don't need that. All content will now be in this format. So definitely good to have a back and forth like this. And while there's a tendency to just accept whatever it says, it is worth reading it because you're going to save yourself time in the future because it can definitely go down the wrong track. Perfect. Okay, let's do it. And as expected, it didn't get it right first time. So I'll have a back and forth with it just to get this working. Okay, we're making progress. We now have some functionality around citations. So when you click them, it is showing as a pop-up, citation 2, page 1, lines 1 to 14. But yeah, we are making progress. So now what I'll do is I'll copy in a screenshot from NotebookLM and actually show what I mean. So if I click 85, for example, it brings me to that specific source on the left-hand side. So a picture paints 1,000 words here, a lot easier just to provide the screenshot. So it's proposing that it needs to query the database to get the document chunks for highlighting, and I'm just asking the question, do you really need that? Because we're passing the source ID and the lines, is that not enough? Perfect, yeah, it's not going to do it now. This is actually a really interesting learning as well, which is that your test data needs to be up to date. So in the database, I have a sources table, and the content is set to null in the vast majority of sources, as is the summary. And when Lovable was analyzing the database, it looks at some test data, and it spotted that that was null. So it pretty much says here that the content field is null, likely because the full text content isn't stored there, which is incorrect. So what I got it to do is I asked it to review a specific source that has this set, which is this one. Then it can see, that's actually a well kind of maintained source, and now it's built the plan around that. So that's a really good learning, is to purge old test data that isn't actually reflective of the kind of data that you're going to have in your system. Okay, let's implement this. Okay, so it looks like we're done, and let's see how it works. Cool, that does kind of work. Let's have a look. Excellent, that's brilliant. Yeah, like there's a bit of fixing up needed, clearly. Definitely works. 1 and 2 seem to be the exact same. We'll see why that is. There's 4, there's 5. So yeah, we're definitely getting closer. And then if you go back, excellent. So it has actually listed the citations and lines here. So for some reason, 1 and 2 are the same. Let's see what's happening in the back end. Oh, it's actually just creating its own indexes. So yeah, instead, these should be the indexes that we're getting from here. So yeah, I can make that change. And actually for this one, let's use the edit so that we can kind of be laser focused on the element that needs to change. So yeah, I've selected this element and I'm just saying the citation number in the button should be the chunk index from the chat. Okay, that's fixed now. So we have number 1 and number 1 here, both linked to the same citation. And then down to 4 and then number 10, I assume it's somewhere down here. So we need to fix up the UI. I'll do that now so that it more closely aligns with what's on NotebookLM. Great, so I've spent a couple of hours making some changes. Let's go through them. The first one is I've changed the display of these citations. So right now, if I click on one of these links, it brings me to the actual citation within the source document and it highlights it. And if I click on another one, it'll pan me up to that section of the document, as you can see there. So that's really cool. If I ask a question, I've now added a loading icon. So what is Formula 1? You have these 3 dots that appear. So at least there's some feedback from the interface. And there's our response. And again, by clicking the citation, it brings you to the section of the document. Then this sources section on the left, you can now close this the same way you can do it on NotebookLM, as you can see here. So that opens it up and that closes it. This opens it up, this closes it. And by clicking into the document, you can preview it. So there's a summary of the source, which you can close. Again, that's the same as you have here. And even if that's open, if you click on a citation, it'll automatically close it and bring you to the section. So really cool. And it's great that you have traceability now on what inspired the LLM to actually create this paragraph, so you can essentially fact check it. And I've also implemented this clear chat button on the top right. So this is the same as the refresh button that you have on NotebookLM. And this essentially clears your chat history. So if I click this now, it deletes out all of the lines in the n8n chat histories table that are related to this notebook ID. A couple of other changes I made. I've added this nice little logo on the top left of a notebook, which you can see here on the home page as well. And I've tidied up the styles of this section too. So now when you create a new notebook and when you upload a source, the processing of this first file is what sets the title and the description, but now it's also setting an icon and a background color for this card. So you can see the icon here of a nice little racing car. And if we come back to the home page, it's set red as the background color. So if we try a new one, let's upload some tennis regulations. There's the rules of tennis. And this is the n8n webhook that actually carries this out. And it's come back with a tennis racket and a ball, and it's set green for the grass of a court. So that's pretty cool. And the last thing I did is I implemented a cascade deletion. So if we take this tennis notebook, for example, and if we come into Supabase and have a look at the bucket, so the notebook ID starts with F130, and that's this bucket down here, F130. And this is the rules of tennis, I'm sure. Exactly, yep. And then that bucket is linked to this database table. So under sources, we have the rules of tennis. F130 is the notebook ID. So now if I come into the app and if I delete this notebook and confirm it, what this does is you get a confirmation on the bottom right there. So if I reload, that's now gone, and the actual folder itself is gone, as well as the source. So if we refresh here, it's gone from there. And it also deletes out any of the relevant chunks for that source in the documents table. So that kind of cleanup operation or that cascade deletion is very important, otherwise you'll have a lot of orphan data. So let's just do a little bit of a tidy up here and let's delete out all of the various kind of test notebooks I created along the way. And just to say, there was quite a lot of back and forth over the last couple of hours with Lovable, particularly on that cascade deletion. It's quite a fleshed out process because you're dealing with both the database, you're dealing with storage, and then importantly, you're dealing with various kind of database functions and policies as well. So it's very easy for Lovable to kind of go in the wrong direction. And what I found was by asking it to review all of the database schema, review the buckets, review the policies, and then make a plan, it actually was able to do it properly. But even still with that, there was a back and forth to get it right. Okay, so that's the last deletion. And let's leave this one as is for the moment. And if we come into our buckets and click reload, now we only have 2 sources. So actually there is an orphan bucket there. What is the ID of this one? 796. So I'll just delete this one manually. Now actually the documents hasn't deleted, so I think I need to review that cascade deletion. And yes, it's because the document ID is buried in the metadata here. We probably need to surface that into a column that we can then link off. So let's add that to the backlog, I think. But if you look at notebooks, we only have a single notebook now. So at this point, I think I need to look at the backlog and see where should I go next with it. There's lots of functionality I could build out, such as the notes, such as the audio overview. I wouldn't mind building out the support for multiple file formats. Currently, it only supports PDFs. And the other thing is I'd like to carry out a lot more testing on this. So we're really kind of into product management at this point. Now that we have the source upload, the source preview, the citations, the chat all working, it's a case of where do we go next with it. So let's add support for other file formats. Let's go with maybe a text file and an MP3 file. And you'll be able to see the process so that you'll be able to expand this for other file types. So to test this out, I'll just generate an MP3 file using OpenAI's text-to-speech. So I'll just copy in this summary and click generate. Of course, in reality, this could be meeting notes, interviews, podcasts, etc. But good to get a test file up and running. So I'll download that. And let's just upload it and see what happens. So if I come into n8n, so currently this is active, but if we're going to continue developing it, let's take it offline. And that way we can actually just manually trigger it. It's just easier to build it like that. So let's unpin this data. We do need to get the test webhook again. So we'll grab it there. Back into Supabase. So these are edge function secrets. We probably need a better way of switching between test endpoints and production endpoints. I might add that to the backlog. Okay, that's added in. Can take a couple of minutes to update. But now if I click execute workflow, and let's try to upload this MP3. That's that one there. Okay, and it has successfully uploaded and it is processing. And yeah, we have some level of an execution on this workflow. It got to the switch, which is essentially what I was hoping for. Yeah, there's no MP3 option. So let's add another rule for routing this then. Click on JSON. So this is audio. So let's drop that in there. Copy out audio MPEG. And now this is our MP3 track that we then need to extract from. Okay, so let's make some space. So click on plus, OpenAI, and then we have transcribe, I believe. Yeah, transcribe a recording. Then it needs binary data, which is fine because that's what's coming through from here, and it should flow through the switch, which it does, yeah. So I don't think there's anything I need to set here. Now, there is a limit on the audio file size, so that might need to be handled, but let's leave it as is for the moment. So now let's actually pin this webhook and let's run the execution again. So we'll click execute workflow, and it has gone to OpenAI to transcribe. And let's see the output. Yeah, perfect. That's exactly what I put in when I generated this audio. Now, if I drop that up to the code node, and yeah, that's going to be generating the notebook ID. So if I play that, our notebook ID, and what is this one looking for? Now, this generate title and description is looking for a prompt specifically from extract from file, which is here. That's not really going to work. So maybe what we'll do is maybe in this code node, we'll output another parameter, which will be the text that was extracted. So let's go with extracted text, and that's extracted text equals. So extracted text is either going to be the OpenAI text, which is there, or it's going to be the text from extract from file. And actually, we are using JSON here, so it's going to get it from the previous node. Does this output text? Yeah, it does indeed. Yeah, that outputs text. So that should work. Perfect. So now that's going to give us extracted text, and then we can update this use extracted text. And that's the same here with this edit fields. That needs to be pulling it from this new kind of parameter coming out of the code node, extracted text. Okay, let's give this a go and see, does it work? Execute workflow, on to OpenAI to transcribe the MP3, generating the title and description. Now we have run into a problem on Supabase, and it's the same thing again. So get that from the code node. That has now succeeded, as has that. Let's run this, and that's then going to carry out the chunking of that data, which it has done. So then that's hit the process document callback, which then uploads the database in Supabase, and then it updates the actual front end as well, showing this green tick to say that the document has been successfully processed and chunked. And now if we click on MP3, cool. So we have a summary of the MP3 text. We actually have the information that was in that transcript. So that's working really well. That was pretty fast, actually. And you have a nice MP3 logo. Cool. So let's test it out now with a text file. And this is pretty much how you build up kind of file support in this type of function. So let's remove the pin, click save. And again, let's just create a text file using the same data. So I have a test text file here, just with the same information. So now let's add the source, and this is waiting for a trigger event. And there we go, it's uploading it. You can see success on the bottom right, and it has triggered, and again, back to the switch, so perfect. And now if we click on switch, let's see what we're getting. So download the file, we're just getting the data. So there's no binary as such, which is fine. And you can see content type is text plain, which is there. So let's add another root, and we'll drop that in. Text plain, which gives us a root 2. And I think what we should do is just output this text in a node using the exact variable text. It's the same here. This is outputting text as an output field. So is that. And this is expecting text as the input. Whereas currently this is data. So let's just do a quick edit fields, and we'll just call it text. And that can simply then just pull in the information from the download file like that. Perfect. So it's remapped now to that variable name. And now when we come in here, that code node should work as is. So if I click on execute workflow, it should flow all the way through, which it does. And if we come back here, yeah, it has a green tick. It has its own icon, test text file.txt. We have a source guide, and we have the text in the file too. And just to make sure everything is okay there, let's go into the bucket, into our sources. And yeah, we have 3 different sources. That is text plain, application PDF, and an audio MPEG that you can preview. Excellent. So that's how we can get kind of file support using our system. Surprisingly easy once you have the actual workflow set up. So I found a couple of more tennis PDFs. I want to test it out on NotebookLM to see when you add additional sources, these sample questions that appear at the bottom of the chat interface, are they kind of dynamically generated based off the sources that you upload or select? So if we add another one here, do we get additional ones? Yeah, we don't really. I wonder, is it only based off the first one that's uploaded? If we delete the first one, yeah, they stay there. So I think it's only based off the very first document. So that's doable, because when we do upload our first document, we're triggering this generate notebook details workflow. And actually, this needs to support multiple file types as well. So what we're doing here will need to copy in to this workflow as well. So let's add that to the list. But for the moment, where it says generate title and description, let's add in some more information so that we can populate out this section here with kind of the sample prompts that you could query this document with. Okay, so within this generate notebook details, let's click into the system prompt and let's make some changes. Now I have added a few things here off camera because to get the actual icon and to get the specific color on the dashboard page, you can see here, I've had to add that into the system prompt. So here I'm asking it to output an emoji and output an appropriate color from this list, and I'm giving it specifics that it can include. All of these are Tailwind CSS classes that we're kind of dynamically building out. And then that's also included in the structured data output parser here. We're going to need to add an additional item here, and this will be example questions, and this will be an array. So we'll do it like that. And then if we come back in here into our system prompt, also output a list of 5 example questions that could be asked of this document. And let's just copy out the question that we have here. So just to give it a flavor of the type of question. Okay, so now let's come back into here. Let's create a new notebook and let's upload a first source. Let's go back to our F1 example. So there's the principles. Now that has failed, but that's fine. I was kind of expecting that. If we come into here then and go to executions, and if we click on here, okay, so we have example questions now. That was pretty easy. What are the general principles that govern the FIA's Formula One World Championship? Now they're a little bit long-winded. I actually wouldn't mind them a bit shorter. So I might just say maybe maximum 7 or 8 words. And actually the example I gave is way too long. So maximum 10 words each. Okay. So now we just need to update our edge function that saves this to the sources. And we could probably re-engineer this because in one of these workflows, we're just updating the source directly, which is here. Whereas with this workflow, we're getting the edge function to do it. So we're kind of doing the same thing in 2 different ways. And it's a lot easier for us to make changes in n8n than it is to vibe code them within Lovable so that it makes changes to the edge functions. So there's definitely a little bit of refactoring we could do there. So another one for the backlog. But we'll leave it as edge functions for the moment. And let's just look at the output that we're getting. So this is the output. Now we do need to store these example questions somewhere. And as they don't actually change depending on which sources you upload, they're only kind of generated once. We could definitely just store it as maybe a JSON array in the sources table. So if we look at our table, we have sources. So we could have maybe example questions as a JSON B maybe. So we'll come down here and let's go into chat mode and let's plan out this feature. Here we have example questions that can be asked of this document. These questions need to come from a new column in the sources table that stores an array of 5 questions. The generate notebook details edge function needs to handle a new data structure coming through from the backend that will pass these questions. And then when an element is clicked in this front-end list, it needs to populate this chat interface and trigger the chat button, which will then pass it into the other n8n webhook. Cool, so let's just grab this output again, and I'll paste it in here. Can you review the Supabase sources table and edge function and plan an approach for this feature? Okay, let's do it. So as you can see, I am being quite prescriptive with Lovable here and guiding it on the type of solution that's needed. I could, of course, have just left it up to Lovable to figure it out, but because I'm in control of the backend with n8n, I can be quite prescriptive around what the inputs and outputs are of these webhooks. So I do find it's faster if you are prescriptive like this. It's not always called for, but we'll definitely end up with kind of less features that aren't actually needed, and there might be less of a back and forth. But if you're not that familiar with software development, it probably is easier just to ask the open-ended question and let it figure it out itself. Okay, so it's proposing to add example questions as a column. I'm happy with that. It's suggesting an array of text. That should be fine. Then it'll update the edge function to extract the example questions from the n8n response. And then it'll replace these hard-coded questions with these dynamic questions from the sources table. Well, that looks pretty good. Let's implement it. Okay, looks like it's finished. So let's create a new notebook. We'll delete that one. And now let's see when we upload it, will it generate it correctly? It has come back as failed, so something has broken, and we don't have our dynamic sources there. So I'm assuming it's this edge function that's failed. That's why it failed immediately. And there's the logs. Now I'm not getting an error, actually. Oh, it has loaded, actually. Cool. Okay, so we do have our list. It has shown us failed, though, so let's investigate that in a second. Now, if I click on one of these, will it automatically trigger the chat? Aha! Brilliant! It did. Now, interestingly, we're getting a sorry, I don't know. Let's dive into that one again, though, because we have only uploaded a snippet of the regulations. Maybe that's why. But let's come in to see why this failed. So yeah, the processing state of the file says failed. And while we do have the example questions, we're kind of missing everything else. So I'm just saying it looks like the new change has broken some existing functionality. The file upload is showing failed, and it no longer saves the content summary or display name of the source. Aha, the process document function is failing with the 404 of yes, yeah, fine. Let's just upload a new one, and I just need to manually trigger this because I changed this back to the test webhook, which is this one. So let's unpin this, and we'll click execute workflow, and yeah, we have a new notebook now, and let's try it. Yeah, it is showing us processing. So that is user error, not Lovable's problem. There is the notebook details, and this should be the source details. Now, it isn't automatically loading, so I think that possibly is more a reflection of the state change that's needed, and it has kicked in there when this has gone to ready. Interesting. I'm saving the questions in the wrong table. They're supposed to be saved at the notebook level, not the sources level. Yeah, they're saved there. That's why it was coming in at that time. That is my mistake. And this is the problem with being prescriptive. You can actually send it in the wrong direction. Okay, I think that's fixed. It is loading it all up. And there you go. Nice. We are getting our test questions or our example questions load up immediately. And I just got an error actually when testing this. And I think this is a problem with LLMs in general when you get it to change code, is that sometimes it can dream up small changes. So if we look at generate signed URL, this is now returning an error. And previously I had this mapped to file_path, whereas on the left-hand side, the changes made to the edge function now have it as file path, all one word with P capitalized. So I'll need to remap this now, but it's just something to look out for, how it might actually change variable names very slightly and throw things off. And yeah, there's a whole raft of problems now because of that. Source ID, it's changed as well. So this is possibly something you could put into the knowledge section of Lovable, give a naming convention on variables. But in reality, it shouldn't actually make this change anyway, because it was already in the code. Anyway, let's keep going. Even that's returning an error as well. Source ID is required. And then it's also expecting source ID. Oh my God. I might copy back in these variable names just so that it reverts it back to the way it should be. In fairness, it doesn't actually do this that often. This is the first time I've seen where it's kind of dynamically overwriting the variable names when it shouldn't. So I'll restore the version of the workflow here as well. Okay, all good. And that has made changes as well. So let's test it out again. Okay, we've succeeded. So all fixed. So fresh end-to-end test, new notebook, uploading a file, and those came in very fast. Excellent. Yeah, and also the upsert into vector store has succeeded. And actually now if I ask the question, I might get a better answer. Maybe that was the reason why I got the sorry, I don't know answer earlier. Yes, that's much better. Cool. And we can click into the sources. Okay, so I might just fix up the UI here. All of that's supposed to be on a single line that actually pans horizontally. And then also when you click one, it should disable it or remove it from the list. Yeah, I'll take a screenshot of this one because you can see there's an arrow where you can actually horizontally pan. So the questions should be on a single line with an arrow for horizontal panning. And once a question is clicked, it should either be disabled or removed from the list. Okay, that looks good. So we have our arrow, and if we click it, and yeah, you can see that it actually pans left and right. Nice. And if I click the first one, okay, well, it hides the questions immediately. That's okay. And let's see now, is it actually disabled? It is a pity that we can't stream the actual responses from n8n. I don't think n8n currently supports that. And interestingly, we got an overloaded error on the agent. So let's add some error handling to this. So if we come into the agent, I've set max retries as 3, and I've set 5 seconds in between each retry. If it actually errors out fully at that point, we might continue using an error output. And it basically means then that we can respond with something to the actual webhook. Of course, the webhook is responding immediately. So maybe on error, we would just save to that Supabase chat history table. Let's go to Supabase, we'll create a row, and let's just copy out this, and we'll just send this back with an error message. Anthropic's models do have a tendency to throw overloaded errors at times, so we definitely need a way of gracefully handling it. It succeeded there, for example. So now if we come in here, and within the n8n chat histories, ID is going to be auto-selected, session ID and message. So session ID we're getting from the webhook, which is there. And then we'll just set the message. And this is what we're going to send. And then just the text will be, sorry, I encountered an error, creating a response, please check the error log. Just leave it at that. Okay, so that should definitely help there. We have some retries on the agent, and we actually just produce an error message back to the front end if for whatever reason it can't respond. So let's try it again. So I've asked the question, and it is generating the response, as you can see there. And yeah, definitely a pity that we can't stream n8n responses. It'd be brilliant if we could just build it up. Otherwise, users are waiting for a response. So there's the full response. And yeah, it's removed from the list. Excellent. So we have 2 more features to build, at which point I think we have version 1 of this My NotebookLM complete. And that's this notes section on the right-hand side, as well as this audio overview section. So let's tackle the notes section first. That's probably the easiest one. So if we click on Add Note, obviously nothing happens. This menu doesn't do anything. So let's see what happens on NotebookLM. So Add Note opens up a kind of a WYSIWYG editor. By clicking on these, I've already removed these 3 dots. Allows you to convert all notes to source. That's nice. Let's leave that as a phase 2 feature. Delete all notes. That's okay. We can do that. And then if you ask a question, I believe there's a button to create a note from the response. So let's build those 2 features. Add note, convert a response, or save a response to a note, and then delete all notes. Let's build those. So let's go with the save to note first. Okay, so I've copied that out. And again, let's go into planning mode for this, because we are dealing with notes, so there's a database table, there might be edge functions needed. So we'll enable chat mode, and you plan out the following feature. As you can see attached, at the end of an AI response within the chat interface, there should be a save to note button. If clicked, that AI text response should be saved to the notes database table and shown on the right-hand side. If a user clicks add note on the right, I'd like a pop-up with a text area to load with the save button. Clicking save should save the note and update the list. Let's leave it as a pop-up for the moment. Okay, let's see what the plan is. Cool, so we have a good plan in place. We already have the table, so it's going to use it. Now it's planning on adding RLS policies. It always wants to do this, and this always causes problems. Just check what policies we have. We already have policies. So having duplicate policies causes big problems. So I'm just going to tell it not to create any more. Maybe we shouldn't have it as a pop-up. I can see what happens here in that when you click on a note, it hides the actual chat interface and it becomes kind of a 50-50 layout, which is really nice. And then it's the same for add note. So maybe let's move it to that. So I've taken a screenshot of this design, and actually let's do it like this one as well. And now we're saying instead of this pop-up form, let's have this new notes interface. And then it dynamically loads into the studio column and the width expands as a result. And then this new interface will work for new notes that need to be created, as well as kind of read-only notes that have already been created. Let's leave it on chat mode as well. There's a lot happening with these 2 prompts. Okay, yeah, all of that looks really good. So let's implement the plan, and fingers crossed. Yeah, it's going a bit off track here. It's trying to create the table and the policies again, which already exist. So definitely for big features, it is worthwhile breaking them down into smaller chunks. I'm trying to get it to do too much, I think, here. It's gone now to make changes to the various interfaces. Let's see how it works. Okay, so save to note button is done. So is our notebook management. I don't see a save to notebook button, but oh yeah, there it is, save to note. For some reason, it appears at the top of the AI response, so we just need to get that moved down. So if I click add note, oh cool, that works. Let's put in test note. Here is my note. I'm going to click save. Excellent. That looks really nice. If we click add note and click X, nothing happens. And now if I click save to note, okay, something has happened. It has tried to save it. Yeah, it's just saving the JSON that is actually in the database for this. So we need to kind of extract out either the text or we need to render this the way it's being rendered here. That might be a better shout, actually. Let's try to render what's here using the same kind of functions. That way then we can click on citations here, which should load up the sources there. So yeah, a bit complicated, but this could work. That's pretty good so far. And you have delete actually. Let's see, does that work? Cool. Yeah, the CRUD works on these notes. Nice. Yeah, it's loading into edit note as well. So we need actually view note. And that's kind of what's here. So if you look at, let's save this one to note, and if you click it, saved responses are view only. So this is like a view version of the note, and then you have your citations. Okay, let's try to get this implemented. So I'm asking, can we change this so that if the source of the note is an AI response, instead of loading the data into the edit note interface, we have a new view note interface that is read-only. And this renders this JSON the same way that it does within the chat interface, where a user can click on a citation and it loads up the specific source on the left and jump to the specific lines. Please reuse this functionality. Okay, let's give this one a go. And out of interest, with NotebookLM, what's the title? So here we have probably just the first 30 characters. It generates a title. Okay, so we might need to do that. Okay, so it's a good plan. Let's see how it works. In the meantime, we need to have a think about how we're going to render out this title. Could be an endpoint on n8n. It's such a basic chat completion, it could do it itself, to be honest. That would need to be in an edge function. And then we need to save the OpenAI API key as a secret. Yeah, that's all doable. And I think these are kind of the design decisions that need to be made, or the architecture decisions. Because of course there are times where you will want to use n8n because you might have a very complex workflow that you need to build out. Whereas for something like that, we simply just need to send this text into a chat completion and get it to spit out a 5 or 6 word kind of title for a note. So there's no right or wrong way of doing that. It might be as easy just to do it in an edge function. Well, okay, let's try it again. Let's just delete that one. Yeah, because it's actually saved that as a user note. That's what it said on the left. So now let's click Save to Note. And if we click it, yeah, it hasn't really worked. Let's just check the database and see what's going on. Database, notes. Now the source type is set as user. That's probably incorrect. So if I change this to AI response, let's change both of them. And back in here. Okay, and if I click it now, okay, well, it is view only, so that's interesting. We're not seeing our citations like that. So we basically need to see this one bubble appear here. So the first thing is it should be saving this as AI underscore response. And then secondly, the view interface is not showing the citation bubbles that can be clicked to load the source. Okay, it's claimed it's fixed that, and it possibly has actually. I do see bubbles, and if I click them, nothing happens. Swing and a miss. Now at least it's still working here, because I don't want to break the existing functionality. Actually, let me just close that and test it. Yeah, the source isn't opening. This is definitely getting complicated behind the scenes. I hope it's kind of reusing components as much as possible. Okay, now let's see, does it now work? It does, excellent. That's brilliant. If I close the source and if I click it, it opens the source. Fantastic, that is excellent. And we don't have a way of actually deleting these. You can delete manual notes, but you can't delete AI responses. So let's add that one. That's one thing. Usually when you have kind of like small jobs for Lovable to do, you can add up to 3 jobs in a prompt. Of course, you could add 50, it just won't do them all. So within Lovable's documentation, they kind of within Lovable's documentation, they do recommend you limit it to 3. So here I'm just going to say we're missing the delete button. Then I'm going to say for an AI response, can we create a quick edge function that sends the AI response to OpenAI to generate a 5-word note title? This can then be rendered here. Let's leave it at that. So that's 2 jobs for it to do. Okay, that's done, and it's using GPT-4o Mini. Let's have a look at the edge function. Yeah, generate note title. Go to the code. And yeah, it looks pretty straightforward, which isn't a surprise. GPT-4o Mini, your helpful assistant generates a 5-word title. That's fine. Cool. It just needs an OpenAI key then. And it's prompting me for that here on the left-hand side. I'll add the API key, and that saves then as a secret within Supabase. Okay, so that's saved. Cool. So let's test it out. So can we delete? We can. We'll delete both of those. And oh yeah, that's supposed to render the bottom left, but we'll do that in a second. So save to note. Actually, it should generate a preview as well. And it looks like it's broken what I previously fixed. So that's supposed to be set as an AI response, not as a user. So we need to fix that again. Now, did the edge function get triggered actually? Let's go to logs. No, it didn't get triggered. The edge function didn't get triggered. That's the second problem. Can we adjust the edge function to extract the first 20 words of the text? And then with the rendering of the notes on the right-hand side, it should show this title and extracted text. Okay, so a few things for it to do there. Let's see how it works. Oh, yeah, we at least have our new column. So that's finished. So let's delete this. And now let's add another note. Yeah, still not working. All right, so we have this working now. So if I click Save to Note, you can see the AI response note jumps in on the right-hand side. If I click it, it's showing as the view interface or read only. And these citations or these jumping to sources work as well. And if I X out at that, and if I click Add Note, this note is editable. New note, test 1, 2, 3, and we'll save. And you can see that shows up there. And we also have deletions. Oh no, we're missing our deletion. So we'll get that added, and then let's move on to the next feature. Cool, so our delete button is back, and if I click it, it has now been removed. So on to the last big feature now of this app, And that is this audio overview section where we can generate a podcast style audio featuring two hosts and discussing the source materials that are uploaded. So NotebookLM is obviously a Google product, and within Google's AI Studio, they have a generate media section where you can synthesize a podcast with multiple speakers, as you can see here. So we'll be using this API to generate our podcast that can be played within the app. So what we might do first is let's get this working in n8n directly, and then once we're happy with it there, we can then integrate it with the front end. So if we come into documentation, and let's have a look at the speech generation, and then there's single speaker text to speech and multiple speaker text to speech. So that's what we'll be using. And they have a curl rest example code here. So let's just copy this out and let's come into n8n and we'll create a new workflow. And we'll call this podcast generation. So this will start with a webhook, but we'll just use a manual trigger for the moment just so we can test it. Now we need a HTTP request node. And if we import this curl, now this probably won't work because we do have commands at the bottom here. Yeah, so we did get an error. That's not too surprising. So let's just make a couple of changes here. So we just need to end it at the end of this single quote because this is the data of the body. So if we just delete out the rest of that and click import, and it has worked, brilliant. So let's run through this. We're posting to this endpoint. This is the Gemini 2.5 Flash preview. And we have an authentication set and it's trying to pass it here with an API key. So if we come in and get API key, I already have one set up, I believe I do. So I'll just copy that out and let's just drop it in there. Now there's no authentication set and you can see that it's trying to pass an API key that's in the query parameter actually, so it's in the URL. Instead of doing that, let's try to use the predefined credential type. This should work. So if I just use Google Gemini, because I already have one set up here. So let's just disable send query parameters for the moment. If we get an authentication error, we can revert back to that. So then the body that we're passing is this. Now, maybe let's get rid of that and put it into this field. And let's open it up and have a look. So this is quite messy. I might put this into a JSON formatter and it is invalid. So, okay, let's just go back to the documentation. So this is the JSON. No, this is the JSON. Let's copy that. And if we paste it in there, it's better, but we still have an error. Bad control character and string literal. So it probably needs a new line, I'm assuming. You can't just have an empty space like that. So let's just try it with new lines. Yeah, that's now valid. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we need to now dynamically populate this. So maybe let's delete this and we'll reference a variable here. So if we X that, let's switch this to expression. So at least we can drop in a variable. And then if we add a field, so edit fields set, and we're going to call this our prompt. And we'll just do test 1, 2, 3 for the minute. And then here, come back in and back into the JSON. And now we can drop in this prompt into there. Perfect. Now off camera, I was kind of working on this system prompt. So just to give you background to this, I found this interesting article on Nicole Henning's website, where she actually tries to reverse engineer the system prompt for NotebookLM's audio overviews. So she did a bit of work on this and has outputted a draft system prompt that we can use. So I'm taking this system prompt, then I also need to provide the sources. So let's come back into our edit fields here, set this to expression, and let's open it up and let's paste it in and let's have a look. So here I'm saying, I'll give you the text of sources and I'd like you to use the instructions below to write a podcast script. So number one is I'm giving it an example output structure and a transcript. So I was playing around in NotebookLM, I got it to generate a few podcasts and then I converted those to transcripts and I've pasted in the start of one of those podcasts here. So this at least provides some guidance on what good looks like for this transcript. And you can see speaker 1, speaker 2, and there's a back and forth. Some sentences are quite short, others are quite long, but you get the drift. And then the instructions to follow is the next section, and this is what I've used from Nicole's website. And I've made a couple of tweaks to this. So talking about how to open it, the dialogue structure, language and tone, etc. The sources then to create the transcript from, we need to dynamically drop these in here. So we'll do that in a second. Important, only output the transcript and do not include any line breaks. So we're happy for kind of your standard new lines in between speaker 1 to speaker 2, but we don't want any big gaps in between sentences. Okay, so let's grab the sources now that we can drop in here. So if we make a bit more space again, and if we come to Supabase, we can get many rows. And essentially, we just want to get all of the rows that are associated with the notebook ID. Now on NotebookLM, they do it per selected source. We're not doing that for this phase of the build. So the table is sources, and the condition here is where notebook ID equals, and then that needs to be passed in from the front end into this workflow through the webhook. So let's just grab one to hard code for the moment, which is this one. So that's now hard coded. So if I click execute step, you can see that we're getting all of the documents, and importantly, we have all of the content as well. So that's what we're going to be able to drop into the next stage. So let's rename these. That's get sources, that's set prompt, and this is generate audio. And then back in here, now we are getting a lot of information here. Let me quickly add another source because we will need to be able to handle multiple sources. So we have one, choose another one, which is there, and that's processing, and it's complete. So now if we go back to n8n, and if we execute this step again, yeah, we now have 2 items. So that's what I was thinking might happen. So we now need to aggregate this back to 1 because we don't want to create 2 podcasts. We just need a single podcast with multiple sources. So if we click on plus, so we'll aggregate, oh yeah, individual fields, perfect. So what do we need? We want the notebook title. That would be useful. We also want the content. Now we may need to implement something like trimming of content if the source is too large for the actual context window length of the Gemini 2.5 Flash LLM. We won't do it just yet, but that is something we might need to build into this. Okay, so if I execute the step now, so we can see title and content, and we only have one. Oh yeah, sure, it's comma separated. Actually, maybe we should do it a different way. Maybe the first object should be title and content, and the second object should be title and content. So maybe we'll change it. So if we switch the aggregation method to all item data in a single list, and you'll see how this works. So when you click on execute step, you now have data. So this might be better. And then instead of including all fields, we'll just specify the fields we want. So title, comma, content. Yeah, I think that's probably better. So now we can just drop in this data variable into the next node. Cool. So into set prompt, let's open this up. And then sources to create transcript from. And let's just drop in data. And if we go down on the right-hand side, now we are getting object, so we need to do json.stringify and then surround it in brackets. Cool, so there we go. Sources to create transcript from, and they're now loaded in, as you can see. Definitely we're going to run into issues here where there's just too much content in these sources. So we will need to put in some sort of trimming feature, but let's do that again. Okay, so we have set prompt then, and then generate audio. So let's give this a go. Let's click play. Okay, we do have a problem, and the JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON. Yeah, so I'll just add json.stringify to this as well. It's just a nice way of cleaning things up when you're sending them in a web service like this. So we'll remove these, and then json.stringify. Okay, that might be better. Let's save it and go again, and that is executing. Brilliant. Now, do we just wait around for this, or does it give an ID that we then fetch when it's actually complete? Oh, I made a mistake here. I forgot to generate the transcript. Okay, so let's click on plus. We can use an LLM chain because there's no need for an AI agent here. And this is where our prompt goes. So we set the prompt, and then it can just all go into the user message. Okay, let's try it this way. So we'll click execute step. Oh yeah, I haven't added a model. Let's just use, let's say, OpenAI 4.1. And then if we press play, and that has succeeded. So let's have a look at what it outputted. Okay, so speaker 1 to speaker 2, all of that is fine. I believe we need new lines. If I copy this out, for example, and bring it into here, if I paste it in here, yeah, it's just all shown as speaker 1. So I just need to adjust the system prompt slightly. So only output the transcript, and then use \n for new lines in between speakers dialogue. Okay, cool. So we now have these new lines, which is exactly what we wanted. And out of curiosity, if I copy this now in to the AI Studio, yeah, it's not picking it up there, but it might pick it up on the API. I think it could work on that API. Like here, it's probably requiring this, for example. But through the API, that is the equivalent of that. So, okay, so now we can go to the generate audio service, and the text now isn't what I had previously put in. It's now the text that we're getting from this basic LLM chain. And actually, we do need to add in one last thing, which is the style instructions. So for example, if you click podcast transcript here, you'll see it says, please read aloud the following in a podcast interview style. So we just need to include that. Now I could add it in here, but then we have problems with the quotation marks. So instead, I might just get the LLM to output it. So I'll just add it to the system prompt. So I'll drop it down here in the other section. So important, your response must start with, please read aloud the following in a podcast interview style, speaker 1, colon, and let's leave it at that. Excellent. So there's the text. Please read aloud the following in a podcast interview style, then new line, speaker 1 to speaker 2 to speaker 1. Cool. So now if we click play on this, let's see how long it takes to generate the audio. And we are using Gemini 2.5 Flash, so it should be faster than the 2.5 Pro version and cheaper. Okay, so it has finished. And let's have a look at the data. So we are getting the binary of the MP3 that you can see here. So let's figure out what we need to do with this. And this is documented here in the speech generation section of the documentation on Gemini. So you can see that there's various kind of commands that they've included here. Let's drop this into ChatGPT and actually figure out what's happening. Okay, so can you explain what it does? And I've just pasted it in. So it's a JSON processor, similar to what we saw. And this is a base 64 encoded audio string. So we need to decode it back into raw audio data, and then we can write the binary audio data to a file. And PCM is a raw audio format. Okay. And then they're using FFmpeg to convert the raw PCM audio to a WAV file. So it's not actually an MP3. So, okay, that's all doable. Okay, so again, I've just asked ChatGPT, how should this be done in n8n? I could figure it out myself, but why not get some direct inspiration? So we do need to extract the base 64 string. Okay, so let's click on plus. And we do have a move base 64 string to file. So this might get us a lot of the way. So on the left then, if we click JSON, we'll click show data, and then we can just drag in this data. And now if we click execute step, cool. So we now have a MIME type of text plain. We might need to custom set the MIME type, I feel. So yeah, audio L16 is what it's proposing here. Let's try that. So that has worked. The file name, it just says file actually. So let's just type it in as file as audio.pcm. So we'll try that. Okay, that's worked. Now if we click download, I don't know, can I play PCM audio on my computer? Doesn't look like it. So to convert PCM to WAV, it's proposing to use FFmpeg, similar to what has been proposed in the documentation. So we could use an execute command node. I am self-hosting n8n here. So let's try this FFmpeg command. So back in here, we have our audio.pcm. So we'll do execute command, and let's paste in the command. And now let's just update the file name because it's a bit different. So in is audio.pcm, and then out is out.wav. So let's see, does that work? Okay, command failed. Yeah, FFmpeg is not found. So we'll need to install FFmpeg on this server. Okay, so I've just updated my Docker Compose file to install FFmpeg when it's actually built. So we now have FFmpeg up and running on the server. So now if I come back into here and click execute step, it should be able to use the FFmpeg library. Okay, we do have a different error, so at least that's good. Yeah, so no such file or directory, error opening input file. And the reason is this file has actually loaded as binary, but it's in memory. I don't believe it actually exists on the disk. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But what I might do is just save this to disk and then just load that path into this command. So we'll just write the file to disk. And now here we can provide the actual path. So we'll say data, audio PCM. So if we execute that, it's getting all of the data that's here and dropping it into this file. Yeah, that doesn't exist either. Let's try temp, because temp definitely exists. Brilliant. So we have that working now. So temp-audio.pcm. And now if we come to our execute command, so that is the path for the input. And let's use this path then as the output. So temp is out.wav. If we click execute step, brilliant, that has worked. And now if we try to read from that, so that was temp out.wav, and we could have unique identifiers here as well, but that has worked. And if we download, and let's see, can we listen to it?
what's really going on under the
And there you go.
surface of a
It
Formula
works.
One car? I mean, yeah, we all see the crazy speeds and wild overtakes, but the real magic is buried in a set of rules.
Okay, that's brilliant. Now, .wav isn't ideal for rendering on the front end. I know the file sizes can be big. So maybe let's update this ffmpeg command to output MP3. So here's our updated command according to ChatGPT. So we'll give that a go. And that has worked. And now we just need to update this to MP3 and execute. Okay, and let's have a
Do
listen.
you ever wonder what's really going on
Excellent.
under
That
the
still works.
surface of a Formula One car?
Okay, so this is looking pretty good. So the last step here is for us now to upload this to a bucket on Supabase. And that way then the front end can just stream the actual MP3 from that bucket. So again, there aren't any bucket actions native to n8n for Supabase, so we will need to use a custom node. We have already done this though, so let's maybe copy out one of the other nodes we've created. And actually I'm wrong there. We've generated signed URLs from files in a bucket, but we haven't programmatically uploaded to a bucket. So let's have a quick look at the documentation. So we have storage, and we have standard uploads. From looking at the n8n community board, it seems to be pretty straightforward to upload an object. So let's just copy this node from here. I'll drop it in there and let's hook it up and let's make some changes. So we need to hit our specific URL. So let's get that. So that's available in the Data API section of the Supabase project settings. So we'll just copy that out and let's open this up. So we'll bring this in here. So that is my project URL. And then we're hitting storage, v1 object. And then we have the bucket name that we need to upload to. So let's create a new bucket for this. And we'll call this one audio. So that's there. And then we can drop in the file name. Now, actually, we probably need the notebook ID as well. And again, let's just hard code this for the moment because we can get this from the webhook request. Okay, so that is the notebook ID that I'll hard code. And then it's just the file name. And actually within NotebookLM, when you generate the audio, you only ever have access to a single one. So it can be called that. It doesn't need a unique identifier. Okay, so then we're going to use our Supabase credentials, which is there. Then we can send the body. So we're sending this data, which is our binary file, including response headers and statuses is enabled. And we can auto detect the format. So if we click execute step, okay, and it has worked. So if we go into the bucket and go to audio, yeah, there's the notebook ID, there's audio.mp3.
Wonder what's really
And
going
there we go.
on under the...
Okay, so now we just need to get a signed URL for this asset and send it to the front end. And that is actually what we did in the upsert to vector store. So let's copy that node out, drop it in here. And then we have our file path that we got from the previous node, which is the key here in the body. Okay. Now this does have an expiry set, so let's play around with that in a minute, but let's just make sure we can actually get the URL. And we're getting a not found. Of course, yeah, we need to remove sources. That should do it. Okay, we have our signed URL then. So the last thing we need to now do is swap out this manual trigger for a webhook input. We need to get our notebook ID and remove the hard-coded notebook IDs I have in the various nodes here. And then we can just output this signed URL. And that can then allow the streaming of the audio on the front end. So let's do that very quickly. We'll remove that trigger. We'll get our webhook. It's a post. We're going to use the same authentication that we've used on all the other webhooks. And we'll be responding with the respond to webhook node. Well, actually, we can just respond with this signed URL. So just the last node on the canvas, which is that one. And that'll return a JSON object with the first entry JSON. Now with this webhook in place, this workflow is pretty much done. We still have the hard-coded notebook IDs we need to swap out. But at this point, let's go into Lovable now and let's start planning the feature from a front-end perspective. I'll just click Edit actually, and maybe let's remove this Customize button. We can remove this functionality from this phase of the project, and let's just get the generation working from the front end and the streaming of the podcast within the app itself. So I'll just delete that, and we'll just quickly press Save. Okay, and now when I click Edit, I can choose this button so that it knows what I'm talking about. And let's just describe this functionality. So first thing is, I have a webhook that handles the generation of the audio overview. This should be saved in Supabase secret, and this is the test webhook. When this generate button is clicked, it should use an edge function in Supabase to pass the notebook ID into the webhook. The response on the webhook is a signed URL to access the MP3, and we need an audio player interface element for users to play the audio. Now let's get some interface elements from NotebookLM. For example, when I click generate, this is what shows up. So let's just take a screenshot of this. So essentially we're generating the conversation based on 3 sources. While the webhook generates the audio, a loading spinner and text should show, see the design attached. So I'll just paste that design in. And then this is the screenshot of what it should look like when there is a player element on screen. So we'll just copy that out and drop it in as well. So we need to have a think about what happens if the user navigates away from the notebook and then goes back into it, because it's not going to have the webhook response and it's not going to have the signed URL. So let's explain this and let's see what solution it comes up with. So I'm telling it that the audio is saved to the bucket, which is named audio, and it's in a folder with the notebook ID, and the file name is out.mp3. And I'm saying that we need to handle cases where a user navigates away from the notebook, that when they come back, they should see the previously generated audio. And then they would have the option to delete that audio so that they could generate a new piece of audio based off possibly new sources that were uploaded. Okay, there's a lot in that. Let's see what the plan looks like. Okay, so it's proposing to add a new column to the notebooks table, which is audio overview URL. That makes a lot of sense. We just need to have a think about the expiration of that URL and also the privacy side of it, that one user shouldn't be able to access another user's generated audio files. All of that looks good. I'll ask it that question about the expiration and the security side of it. It's proposing a 24-hour expiration. I'm good with that. We do need a refresh mechanism if the signed URL has expired. We definitely do need that. And the proactive refresh option makes sense. And then on the security side, it's proposing that we have storage level security, so RLS policies on that specific bucket, so that the requesting user owns the notebook associated with the audio file. So there is a bit of back and forth, as you can see, just setting out this plan, but I find that this is a better approach than just going headfirst into a build and then needing to unwind a lot of features that you actually don't really need. So now it's proposing to create an audio overviews table. I don't really want that. I prefer if it's just 2 columns added to the notebook table. It's just kind of making things unnecessarily complicated. So this is a bit of a limitation on the planning side with Lovable, is that if you ask it to make a plan, it gives you a really detailed kind of step-by-step plan on what it's going to build. If you ask it to clarify or refine any element of that plan, it then goes and kind of creates a new plan with the changes that you made, as opposed to just editing the previous plan. So I've had it back and forth. I'm not really getting what I want. So instead, I've actually copied out the original plan, and then I've made the changes that it proposed in the reply to my initial response. So I've sent all of that in now as the prompt, and I haven't used the chat feature. I'm just getting it to actually implement this. Yeah, it's definitely gone off track here. It's created a lot of the foundation, but a lot of the detail is actually wrong. So I'm kind of having a back and forth with it now just to iron it all out. I think for big features like this, it's definitely best to kind of extract out a lot of the ideas via the chat mode into a notepad file. And instead of just getting it all implemented in a single shot, to actually drip feed the implementation back into it. So here, for example, it's fixing the edge function because it got the body to be sent to the webhook completely wrong. Okay, so we're now adding our webhook here. So this will be saved as a secret in Supabase. And here it's removed the authorization header, which I did need. Okay, so let's start testing this out. So let's come in here and listen for a test event. If we click on generate, do we receive a response? So no, we haven't got a ping. And I think an error just showed up there, did it? Yes, edge function returned a non-200 error. Okay, let's have a look at the edge function. So logs, and it's an authorization problem. Okay, so back into Lovable. I'm just pasting in this error message, but I'm just telling it it needs to copy the exact way it's authenticating in the other edge functions, because it works in the other edge functions. Okay, so that hopefully has solved that one. So let's come back in here. Let's listen again. We'll click generate. And yes, we do have some communication from Supabase's edge function. Cool. Now it's sending sources, which I do not need. So remove the sources, remove the type. So the body still is wrong. So I'm just telling it only the notebook ID is needed. Now I could make these changes myself in the actual code. So I could just strip them out here and deploy the updates. But obviously we're trying to vibe code this as much as possible. So let's let Lovable do the changes. Okay, so it's now just notebook ID. Now let's test it again. So we'll listen for a test event, click generate. Yeah, just notebook ID. Cool, so now let's get rid of these hard-coded notebook IDs that we have here, for example. And we can now drag these in from our webhook. And where else do I have these? I'll just go through each of the nodes. Nothing there. And then let's change this expiry. So that's 3600. Okay, so let's test this again. So we'll click execute workflow, come into here, and now let's click generate. Okay, it's running. We have received just the notebook ID, that's perfect. We have retrieved the two sources for this notebook, as you can see on the left. It's now generating the script between the two hosts of the podcast. And now we're generating the audio on Gemini servers. And I do see a possible issue here because I believe Edge functions have kind of a limited lifespan. So free plan is 150 seconds, paid plan is 400 seconds. And this generate audio feature is definitely going to take some time. So we probably need to split this up. One is just to post the job, and the other is then to wait for the actual job to be completed, saved to the database, and then we can have real-time enabled on the actual table so that it automatically shows the audio overview on the front end. Let's come back into Lovable then, and let's outline the plan. This execute command is kind of hanging as is here. And I do wonder, is it because we're trying to overwrite a file because it has the same file name? So we could give this a unique file name, which might solve this problem. And actually within the generate audio response, there is kind of a response ID, which looks pretty unique. So we could use that. So we'll drop that in here, and that can also then be used here. Maybe also let's put it in this temp here. Temp / this ID -in.pcm. And then the other one could be temp with the ID -out.mp3. Okay, so let's see, can we now run these? So press play on that. That's converting to file, and that has succeeded. And actually, I need to update the path name there too. So press play again, and that should write this file to disk with the new name. Cool, and now if I run the FFmpeg, that's executing. Yeah, we have got a failure, but that's okay. Yeah, I didn't actually save it properly because that wasn't set to expression. Okay. That is now correct. And then here, click execute step. Okay, and that has worked. So then we can just read that. Actually, out of interest, how big is this? Because MP3s will be smaller than WAV files anyway. I think the WAV was 20 megs. Perfect, that's 3 megs. Because with this upload facility, they kind of recommend to use this type of standard upload up to about 6 megs. So we'll execute that, and then we'll generate the signed URL. And that has succeeded. Okay, so our workflow is working. We definitely need to break it up though, because that took way too long for an Edge function to actually be able to operate. So here I'm saying that the webhook has taken up to 5 minutes to generate the audio. As a result, the Edge function is timing out. Let's make a plan around using the webhook to simply start the process. It can return with a 200 quickly to say it's processing. Then when the data is added to the notebook columns, specifically audio overview URL, and audio URL expires at, we can then show the audio interface. And then I'm just saying real time is on that table anyway. Okay, let's get these changes made. Okay, happy with this new approach. So let's implement it. Okay, that's now finished. So let's update our Edge function. And here we're just going to immediately respond. That's that change made. And then here at the end of this process, we need to update the Supabase table. So we'll update a row. And it's the notebooks table where the notebook ID equals what we got from the webhook, which is here. And then what we're going to update is these two fields. So audio overview URL and the audio URL expires at. So the overview URL is easy. That is the signed URL that we have just received. Now I do wonder, do they need the entire URL with the domain? They probably do. So that's this format that we had in the previous workflow. So I'll copy that out and bring it in here. And then the audio URL expires at, I think they're looking for a timestamp. So if we go to table, notebooks, that is a timestamp based off a time zone as well. Date and time, including time zone. So for this, we might just use a code node and just run some simple JavaScript to actually get this. Okay, so this should do it. If we execute it, that's gone back to everything. Let me just pin the data from the last execution. And we can't pin because the file sizes are too big. So okay, let me just run it in isolation. I'll just unhook it. Cool, so that should be what we need. Let me copy that into Supabase just to make sure. 5th of June, 1423. Perfect, yeah, that's good. So that's my new field. So this is timestamp. Okay, so we'll hook that up and then back into Supabase. And now we can just drop in this timestamp. Now this should work. So that's generate timestamp for expires. Cool, so now let's execute workflow and let's do this end to end and see how far we can get. So we'll click generate. It's failed to start the function, so bad start. Please don't tell me it broke my auth again on that function. I wouldn't be surprised if it did. I don't think it did, actually. That's good. So yeah, I might just get Lovable to investigate that. Okay, that seems to be fixed. So let's go again. Click Execute Workflow. Click Generate. Okay, so our generation button is now actually triggering n8n. Let's have a look at what we're receiving. So we're getting a callback URL that you can see here. Let's just check what this does. So let's stop that execution. Let's have a look at our edge function. We have this audio generation callback. So I don't think we need this at all. I think this is what we're doing in this node here. So tempted to just delete this, because all it's doing is setting the expiration time, adding the audio URL, and the success status as completed. So that's actually a change we need to make here. So let's open up this, and this audio overview generation status, we can now say completed. Okay. Yeah, so I've gone down a rabbit hole here with Lovable. I'm just trying to change something quite small, and it keeps just adding like bizarre random new features where the features already exist. And then I'm trying to get it to just add specific small features, and it's still going off on a tangent. So I'm having to kind of massively revert and restore previous versions. So it's quite a frustrating process, this. So I'll just keep restoring back to see where I can get. So yeah, I have to go quite far back, actually. And the problem then is when you actually revert changes like this, the database changes don't actually revert at the same time. So you can end up in kind of quite complex SQL errors. As you can see here, it can't revert database changes. I'll proceed anyway because I know I'm happy with the changes it's added. It's just added a real-time sync for the notebook table. Okay, so we're back to where we need to be, but we just need to be super careful because I've kind of gone around the houses with this. So I might use the chat mode again just to try to get some clarity on what it's going to do before it does it. And as you can see, I've restored I don't know how many times here. So I'm being quite detailed on the chat here to create a plan. Like, do not make changes to the UI. Do not add toasts. Do not add interface elements. Do not change the dashboard. I simply just want real-time subscription enabled on what's already actually in place on the UI. Okay, that's a good plan. Hopefully it can follow its own plan. Let's see. Okay, good. No interface changes. Let's see how it works. Excellent. We're now getting this real-time update that is generating the content. Brilliant. That took way longer than it should have, but anyway, let's get back to our audio overview generation. It's easy to get sidetracked. So now let's try this again. So we're going to execute the workflow, which is waiting for the trigger event. Let's click generate, which is going through this process. So we could probably hide this div when it's actually generating because that's showing. Okay, we're generating audio. Hopefully our FFmpeg fix has worked around the file names, because I think that may have been the problem before. Okay, so that's now hidden. Very good. Okay, the audio is generated. And yes, the FFmpeg has completed. Supabase is updated. Here we go. We have our audio interface.
Standing trackside at a
Brilliant.
Formula 1 Grand Prix, and these cars just rocket past, blurs of color, pure energy. But behind all that speed and drama, there's something most fans never get to see, the ultra-tight, almost surgical rulebook that dictates exactly what these cars can and can't do.
Right, and that rulebook? It's basically the Formula One technical regulations. It's not just a guide, it's the actual blueprint teams live and die by. So today, we're doing a deep dive into the official 2025 F1 technical regulations straight from the FIA, the sports governing body.
That is so good. Okay, let's see what else this does. So we have a download button, which I think just opens it up in a new tab. So we don't really need that. It's a 5-minute audio clip. If I press this button, yeah, it just restarts it. I don't think that's really necessary. We also have this volume control. I suppose we could leave that there. So over on NotebookLM, they have a delete option as well as a download option. So we could do both of those. So let's select this here. I'm saying, can we have a menu here where the download button is? This should have a pop-up menu that contains a download button as well as a delete button. And by pressing the delete button, it clears the appropriate fields in the notebook table for the audio overview and ideally removes that file from storage. I'll use chat mode here just in case it makes a mess of this. Let's get a plan in place. And while it does that, let's open this up in a new tab. Cool, so actually, yeah, when you jump in, it auto-loads the audio overview, whereas if you go into a different notebook, which doesn't actually have one generated, you don't see it. So that is ideal. Excellent. Okay, we now have our 3 dots. Cool, if you click it, you can download. Now it's still bringing you into this, where you can download actually, so really we need that function. And if you click delete, we are getting a cannot delete audio, notebook ID not found. Okay, and if I try to delete again, yeah, that worked. Excellent. And let's have a look at the bucket. Now the actual folders are still there, so I don't think that part of it worked, but we can tidy that up. But the audio is actually deleting, so definitely I'd say in the notebook table, those fields are being cleared. This ID is 3B9, which is this one, and yeah, they have been cleared, which is great. Now we have a lot of test data and dummy data, so we need to kind of clear everything down, I think. So let's just delete everything. And this obviously cascades the deletion with the sources, which is really nice. Okay, so let's create a notebook. Now let's upload a source. Okay, so that has worked. Maybe let's also manually clear this bucket. Well, let's execute our workflow again. Click generate. Yeah, this is great. That's working perfectly now. So I can activate this workflow. I'll update the endpoint in the Supabase secrets. And then with a little bit more testing, this feature is done. Great, and our download button is now actually forcing the download to the browser as well, which you can see there. So that's pretty much all of the main features built for this NotebookLM clone, which is called now InsightsLM. I'm going to do some more testing on this, try and add some different file types, have a back and forth with the chat, make sure that I'm getting good quality results, play around with the notes and the citations a bit more. There's endless tuning that you could do with this system now. And the fact that it's on n8n means that you can kind of adjust the RAG interface and the RAG flows. You could bring in hybrid search. You could bring in contextual retrieval. There's lots of ways of improving this. But essentially, we have a really impressive RAG front end now that can be deployed on n8n locally within businesses, using Supabase locally. So there's so much potential with this at this point. With version 1 of the app created, it was time to ship it. For this, I deployed 2 separate repositories to GitHub, and I want to walk through both of these because they serve very different purposes. First up, we have our main InsightsLM public repo. This is the core front-end application, and it's designed to be deployed to a server and uses cloud-based AI services like OpenAI or Gemini. So this is the quickest way to get this AI research tool up and running. And as you can see, we've had more than 200 stars and over 100 forks already, so lots of users already using this system. So within the README, I have full step-by-step instructions on how to actually set this up. And interestingly, if you were looking to continue vibe coding this application, at the moment it's quite difficult to actually import this app into Lovable, which is a shame. Lovable makes it quite difficult to import applications that are already connected to Supabase. So actually in these instructions I use their competitor Bolt. But because this is a standard React app, it really could be deployed anywhere. After publishing the repo and the associated video, I got a lot of requests to make a private local-only version, which is why I created the second package. This one works completely offline. It uses ColeMedin's local AI package, and it's all containerized in Docker. So essentially you have a local version of n8n, of Supabase, and then you use Ollama for local AI, both for creating embeddings and actually the chat inference. For audio transcription, I used a local Whisper container, and for generating audio overviews, I used Koki TTS. So with this setup, your data never leaves your machine. You could run this completely offline. And for data security and compliance, there is a big movement in business to try to ring fence a lot of these applications in-house. And just a quick note on the commercial use of the app, we are open sourcing our repo, so you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. Supabase is also open source. However, n8n isn't. n8n uses a sustainable use license, which means that they allow their platform to be used for free if it's for internal business use. So if you were selling an application like InsightsLM, by deploying it and the n8n workflows locally within a business, then you're pretty much all set. However, if you wanted to create a SaaS version of the app, you may need an n8n enterprise license. Now, we're not lawyers, so you would need to get clarity on this, or even reach out to n8n with your use case and they'd be able to tell you one way or the other. But an alternative approach, if you were hamstrung there and didn't want to buy an enterprise license with n8n, is you could convert the various n8n workflows into Supabase Edge functions, and that way you're not using n8n at all. So it really depends on your use case. I'll provide a link for this sustainable use license in the description below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to learn more about how to customize this system or to build similar apps like this that tie in n8n workflows, then check out the link in the description to our community, the AI Automators, where you can join hundreds of fellow automators and builders all looking to leverage AI to level up their business. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.